So we are prepared to present you with our proposed budget for 2024-25. Budget team has worked very hard. They've done a really good job under Brian and Adam's leadership, and then of course with Jenny Floyd helping. So I will say that Adam is fully caffeinated and ready to go. Put your seatbelts on. It should be interesting, but I'll turn it over to them, and we'll spend the morning through budget items, and then take a lunch break, and then come back in the afternoon and finish up. So worked really hard. We've got several options. We'll show you. We've got a proposed budget with a couple of options at the end. So lots of detail early this morning to just kind of lay the foundation and give you a complete financial update. But so at this point, I'll turn it over to Brian or Adam.
Thanks, Sean. All right, so today's objective is to provide you all with an understanding of our recommended FY25 budget and prioritize the level of services to be included in the corresponding taxes and rates to fund those priorities. Our brief breakdown, I think we'll make sure we pause at 10 o'clock for a break. Wherever we are, we'll try to kind of wrap up at that point, do a break at 10 a.m. We're going to start with governmental funds and try to get as far as we can. That will probably be the most of the talking points today. And then we'll move into water and sewer and the rest of the enterprise funds, hopefully before lunch. We'll do lunch off-site today, just on your own for an hour, and then we'll come back, knock out special appropriations, and finish any other direction or discussion council might want to have about the proposed budget. So our desired outcomes and the direction we're seeking today at a very high level, we have some options related to this, but this is the base level recommendation that we'll talk about potentials for modifying throughout the day. So the recommended budget includes a tax rate of 50.5 cents per $100 of value, which is a 1.5 cent increase over the current year tax rate. Main Street and 7th are recommended to stay at 21 cents, so no change for those two municipal service districts per $100 of value. Water and sewer rates are currently proposed at 11% for water, 12% for sewer increases. The stormwater rate is proposed at $7 per equivalent residential unit, or ERU, so that's $1 increase over the current $6 rate, with a $350 cap for businesses. Benefits included in the proposed budget are a COLA, or a cost of living adjustment at 4% for all employees, with no merit because we are introducing a new merit program and testing that program out this year. We have 5 total positions recommended in the budget, 1 for the general fund and 4 in water and sewer. And lastly, we'll talk through where special appropriations should be for the year. So that's in the recommended budget. We know there are some desires to modify some of this, so we've got options throughout this presentation to discuss with the City Council. So I'm going to set the stage, and then I'm going to let Adam and Jenny kind of take over for a little bit. So, the great tragedy, the FY25 budget. So the North Carolina Local Government Budget Association does a budget survey every year, and we have the results from that, and it looks as if most budgets across the state are facing similar challenges as we are. And some of my favorite quotes were, no new staffing or other enhancements, use a lot of fund balance, like a whole lot, most likely a significant tax rate increase, really trying to have a sobering conversation with the board about future expenditure growth outpacing natural revenue growth. I think we talked a good bit about that at the council retreat. And then probably my favorite one, we're on a knife's edge right now. Really have gotten used to major revenue growth supporting every want under the sun. That outlook has changed drastically. If things get worse, it could get ugly fast. So that's the survey results that we saw. A lot of people are struggling to keep up with inflation, retirement needs, and cost of living really across the state. Those are the drivers, I think.
So these are quotes from other budget folks across the state.
That's correct. That was their anonymous response to the survey. So to remember, our good Venn diagram here, everybody wants, these 3 things, but you can only have 2. So I want low taxes, I want low density, and I want stable services. All 3 of those do not exist. Right now, we're living in the service cut, increased tax world. I do think, and what we'll see in the model, is that a lot of the developments that are coming online are setting the stage to get us into a higher density world where we can either lower taxes or maintain enhanced services. So I think that is coming. However, right now, we're having to tighten the belt a little bit. So setting the right tax rate, we talk about this most every year, and we provide a list of some comparable communities across the state. We're currently at 49 cents. This budget's proposed at 50.5 cents. The average for these municipalities is 51.39. So you can see some of the range that we're looking at here in this comparable tax rate chart. Again, the unique aspects of Hendersonville's tax base is we are, as we often say, we play much bigger than we are. We are the county seat. We provide most of the core services for the county and region. However, we only have a population of about 14% of the total county population. The typical county seat average is 36% of the total county population. So we're much tighter. We have less of the tax base. And on top of that, we also have quite a large amount of tax exempt properties, approximately $579 million in value, or 5 pennies equivalent on the tax rate, 18% of our total tax revenue. And we have a cost of service model that talks about this in varying ways, from land use type to density to proximity to services, that gauges how much it would cost to serve a property within the city with basic core services. So talking a little bit about that, I just want to dive into some positive aspects of the different ways our tax base has been growing. One is use type, so industrial growth. We have the Jabil development. Originally, this was a 12-year incentive agreement. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that, Angie. However, we're expecting the full payout in FY 26 or 27, with it becoming fully taxable in 27 or 28. So they will have met their incentive agreement 6 or so years early from the current projections that we're looking at, which is great for the citizens of Hendersonville. Additionally, there's about $88 million that came on the tax books from business personal property that's fully taxable. To give you a sense of that, so typically we're about $150 million in business personal property. So this $88 million is a massive increase in business personal property that's now taxable on our tax books due to a kind of intangible offshoot of the industrial development. So that's Eli Lilly that's providing those business personal property values. So that's approximately 2 pennies in value, or $650,000 in tax revenue, and we still have about $400,000 of a loan that we provided to the Garrison site that will be payable to the city once the rest of the properties are sold. So there's still positive money coming in from this site in the future as well.
Let me add a little context there. So Jeff and the mayor were so 10 years ago, we had probably my first retreat, second retreat. We met at Fire Station 2. Jeff, I assume you had just gotten elected. I think you were there. And we talked about the importance of bringing industrial development into the city limits as a critical need. And, you know, it's taken us, it's like planting the seeds, right? And so we planted the seed 10 years ago. And it's taken just time to do it. Well, this is paying off. I mean, that's the importance of having that industrial development inside the city limits, which really helps subsidize the residential property tax rate, the residential properties in town. And this is a clear example of how, if we do it the right way and have the right type of development and continue to work with the partnership, it can help carry the load for our residential property owners. So it's paying off. So and we'll keep pushing that. So so every time you have an opportunity to encourage the partnership and our county brethren, the importance of city county working together to have manufacturing development in the city, it's positive for us and our citizens.
Yeah, thanks for that insight, John. Another example is density. So through the cost of service model, we also look at density and proximity to services. So a couple examples, the Cedars project and the Washburn Tract project, I think the Wilmot is what it's called. The first tower that has been approved and the building permit that was pulled for the Cedars was $68.5 million for the building permit. So that's just the permit. It's likely that the assessed value could come in higher than that, and that's just for one tower. So if you have two of those, the density to that and the proximity to services, generates about equivalent to J-Bill, so about $650,000 in tax revenue or 2 pennies. So these are things that are coming down the line in a few years here that are extremely beneficial for our tax base here and the services we provide. Additionally, the Washburn tract, so is a 300 multifamily unit, 160 single-family patio home unit, less than 1 mile from core services. That type of development, which you can see on the bottom right, is about $435,000 in new tax revenue. So these developments that are dense, close to services, are very beneficial from a return on investment from what it actually takes to serve those services and can help support future services for the city. And go ahead. Yeah.
There's a question about the slide.
Yes.
Oops, sorry. There, I can't remember what the word that they used, but it's like the room that, I don't know, that allows them
floor?
to do,
The floor or what?
like they're like really equipped to do certain things at Jabil and that.
Yes.
But what is that room?
The clean room,
Thank you. Okay, couldn't remember that word. Thank you.
And then lastly, looking at the, taxable versus non-taxable, kind of the case for pilots, just wanted to drop this in here. We have a great example from the 1960s with the Hendersonville Housing Authority where they saw the benefit of public services to their facilities and they agreed to pay us equivalent tax rate in return as a pilot over the years. And just want to plug this in here because I know those tax-exempt properties, they're providing services to the citizens. However, they are a pull on our services as well that we're having to serve those properties. And there is a case, I think, to be made for payment in lieu of taxes.
Is that something we could do with Carolina Village?
Yes, I believe we could enter into discussions with that tax entity.
or other large nonprofit organizations.
Setting the stage for cost of living adjustments. So the League and Association of County Commissioners puts out a survey every year. The chart on the left is the statewide average for COLA and merit combined across the state, broken out by region. So you can see statewide it's about 4.3%. Our region is about 4.4%. And locally, gathering some information, what I've been able to find so far is Buncombe County is doing a 4.89% cost of living adjustment. Asheville is doing 4.11%. Henderson County, I haven't gotten like a firm answer, somewhere between 2 and 5%. We're recommending 4 at this point. Fletcher is 3 based on the baseline of their pay and class study that they just did, and Laurel Park is 2.5. So just wanted to give you all that for reference. Additionally, we're going to talk about this throughout the day. Challenges we're seeing in public safety from recruitment and retention, and based on the current pay levels and what we found out from the proposed COLAs for FY25. We're seeing, if you look on the right, we've got a police officer starting pay for us for FY24 and FY25 proposed $45,000, $47,000 respectively. And then we have Asheville PD, Henderson County Sheriff, Buncombe County Sheriff, Fletcher, and Laurel Park. And the dollar difference, if you see at the very bottom, we're about $2,000 behind Asheville at the current recommended budget, $7,000 behind Henderson County, $2,000 behind Buncombe, $200 behind Fletcher, and $7,000 ahead of Laurel Park, about $800 below the living wage. So that's something we have been talking about, and we have some proposals later in the slides for you all to discuss on this matter in the presentation. And we know the fire department is also seeing similar challenges from recruitment and retention as well. Setting the stage for financial condition, we talk a lot about available fund balance as like something we're always looking at. However, I wanted to expand that a little bit, and we've developed this scorecard that we can look at to see a couple other ratios that might lead into fund balance troubles in the future. So this is something just based on our strategic focus areas we felt was a good measure, and this is how we're going to present kind of the model this year. So I'm going to run through just these indicators just so you're aware of what they are. So the top row is the fund balance indicators. This is essentially cash available to pay for normal operating expenses. It also serves as emergency funds, and it provides the ability to adapt and to unforeseen opportunities. So if you have a healthy fund balance and a partnership project comes along, like the Health Sciences Center, where you need $800,000 to buy a piece of land to develop a property for a great public use, you have that cash available on hand at the time to do that. It's also beneficial for ratings, and it's required to issue debt with LGC approval. So if we're going to go out and do projects with debt, we're going to have to maintain this indicator at an acceptable level. What you're seeing on the screen, and we'll look at the full scorecard from FY20 all the way into an estimate for FY26. Up here, we've got FY23 actuals, and then 24, 25, and 26 estimates. And you can see in 25, we're flagging some of our indicators. One thing to note with this, right, this is a goal, right? This is a goal target. The dollar available and the total fund balance is good enough to make us get through those emergency situations, right? So we have enough fund balance available if like everything shut down and we needed to pay employees for 2 months and keep services going. However, we don't necessarily have that money to respond to unforeseen circumstances, and we don't have the money to be issuing new debt for projects. Second set are operating indicators. So this is pointing to our recurring ability to fund services. So this is just base services, right? It's not our capital services. It's not debt or anything below the line where we're buying land or anything like that. It represents the baseline for our service delivery, and a negative ratio would lead to depletion of fund balance or the need for new revenues in the future. And what you can see is in 23, we classified this as our float year when we were talking about budget. Then we were running an operating revenue ratio of minus 9.76%. So our expenditures were 23.9 million. Our revenues were 21.5 million, about $2 million gap. And that's what we were using those ARP funds for, to float us into reval, recover enough revenue to keep us moving forward. So you can see that ratio is tightened up, and we expect future year to get back on the upswing with this proposed budget, which we'll detail more on some later slides.
I think it's important to say that, these ratios are really, the 25% for fund balance is imposed by the local government commission. And there's other general, and what Brian's showing you is these indicators that are well-known, expected for us to meet, but I think it's important. It's a scorecard for us, right, as your management team to make important decisions during the year, that if we're watching these indicators and if it looks like we're going in the wrong direction, we can toggle the switch and make some changes. Example being, eliminating overtime, things like that, so we can try to get all of our indicators into the green. And it's something that we use to manage the budget and manage our financial condition. So it's important for us to show this to you. I think Brian will say that we're in good financial condition. We can be better, and we want to be better. But we are in these inflation and economic times that we're going to use this to manage our budget over the next couple of years. And it's important for us to show this to our management team behind me so they understand the decisions that we're making and the reason we make recommendations to you in this part of this process.
Thanks, John. Can you say that again in 2 slides for me to summarize that? Because that was a good wrap up.
Sorry.
You're good. I got 2 more indicators. So capital indicator. I do appreciate that. That was good. So the capital indicator, that's the capital ratio there. It's got the 3 red boxes, kind of the third set. This represents investments in our infrastructure. It kind of points to the quality of our infrastructure maintenance at our facilities. Not meeting this ratio leads to deferred maintenance and the need for increased debt service in the future or fund balance depletion in the future. So you can see from kind of a tier and timeline of how these things are operating. When the operating ratio starts to trigger, that's going to lead to us pulling back on capital. It's going to lead to us pulling into fund balance and triggering those in the future. So what I think will come from the capital ratio getting tight is we'll have things we need to issue loans for in the future years in 26 through 28 to catch up on the deferred maintenance that we're putting off right now to keep the fund balance in check. And then lastly, the debt service, there's 2 more. Debt service indicator. This represents debt payments as a percent of total spending. We're spending about 14.14% on debt of our total budget for the general fund in FY24. And not meeting this ratio impacts our ability to issue future debt to fund large projects and impacts bond ratings and rates.
Say that again, please.
Yes, the 14.14. So that is the total amount we're paying on debt service as a percent of our total general fund
Okay.
budget.
How is that? An overall How is that in the overall average with other municipalities? Is that kind of something you aim at, or?
Yeah, so our indicator is 15%. We try to be below 15. That would be where we want to be.
That's
From our financial advisor. So our consultants advise on that. The LGC looks at that. Ratings agencies look at that. 15% is that number there. And then from our comparables, I actually do have a list. We're probably in line being below, but once you get into the 15 and above, we'll be on the high end.
which is 25.
That's correct. And that's why what you'll see when we talk about the model is we're not proposing any debt in the current years. We got to catch up.
We're going to start paying some debt. And for Melinda's purpose, you'll hear us use the acronym LGC, and that's the Local Government Commission. City and counties and hospitals and folks report to a state agency, which is part of the state treasurer's office. They review all our financial data and financial information, and before we can borrow significant debt, we go before the state local government commission in Raleigh, and they had to approve debt. So it's a very, basically North Carolina's a leader in the nation as it relates to making sure we have strong financial condition for local governments, and the local government commission is a reason for that. So when you hear Brian talking about looking at bond ratings and looking at financial indicators, it's really those things are established by the local government commission in Raleigh. They see our audit and everything. So that's what that is. So.
Thank you, John. And Melinda, please jump in if I'm used to have explained sales taxes and all these things. So please stop us at any point just to, slow us down. I might move too quick at some points. And then lastly, our assessed value indicator. So this is kind of the one revenue indicator side of the house that we're looking at. This represents the value of city properties, and it points to growth in the city and capacity to fund services and programs, right? So strong assessed value growth is going to support future services and programs for the city and maintaining existing service levels. Think about the Venn diagram. So you can see the assessed value percent change in 23 through 26 is actually looking really good. We put the ratio target in here is greater than 3%. If you go back, what Adam will cover, you go back into the decade post-recession, it was like no growth. So a lot of this is catching up from the assessed value increases we've had over the past decade. This is a full scorecard. We'll talk more about this later in discussion, so I just wanted to provide that as a point of reference. You can see back all the way to FY20, and you can see those assessed value indicators down there in 21 and 22 post the pandemic. Also staying on stage, just want a quick update on our ARP funds because those are still outstanding and impact the bottom line of the general fund. Currently, the Apple Ridge project has received their $400,000. Children and Family Resource Center, that money has been set aside. Essentially, when I say allocated, it means it has moved out of the general fund balance and is in its own dedicated fund at this point, and there's no further impacts on the general fund of the city. So we've allocated all the funds except for physical legal, which you did last night. You authorized the city manager to allocate those funds last night, the $320,000 there. And additionally, $680,000 was proposed recently to be dedicated to public safety initiatives. In this budget, you'll see $200,000 worth of a new police officer, equipment for that officer, and cameras downtown, with $480,000 remaining to continue to fund that position and other public safety initiatives in future years.
With the Connection Center, $120,000, do we know if that is being,
That money has been spent.
okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you describe that a little bit more? I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused.
So if you remember when we were exploring the Connection Center, we provided money for them to pay for architectural drawings and some operating costs to get to a point where council can make a final decision regarding going forward with the connection center or not. So
Okay.
you basically gave them $120,000 to do their pre-development work.
Okay.
Thanks, John. And then lastly, just a reminder of your strategic plan. We know this is important, and this is kind of what helped guide our budget. We know public safety and employee compensation are those top level priorities. However, we do have a lot of good projects in here meeting the strong infrastructure goals. The strategic housing plan is underway, and we're wrapping up our community or our comp plan this year. So those top 5 priority areas are definitely getting the attention throughout these budgets. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, John. As John alluded to earlier this morning, I'm heavily caffeinated, so I will try to keep this at a human pace and also promise to try to keep it lively and not too much of a downer. So beginning with the general fund, just setting the stage for how we look at all of our funds in the budget development process. Each year we look at the last audit. So for FY25, our last completed audit was FY23. So we're going to look at the estimated budget from that year versus the actual where we ended up. And then also for the FY25 budget process, we're going to look at the current year revised budget compared to what we're recommending to next year. And we'll also cover any major changes that occurred during the development process. So with each of the major funds, we'll cover revenues, expenditures, the other category, which is transfers, kind of below the line actions, fund balance, and then we'll mention strategic plans and future priorities. Things to remember, budget is an art and a science. We are pretty good at our estimates, but they are not guarantees. We budget very conservatively, but when we do receive good news, we adapt to our opportunities. And finally, our estimates are produced at the beginning of each year. We don't change them during the budget process. So what we show you as an estimate was created upon budget adoption. For the general fund, some of the things that we would, at the end of this presentation today, would like direction on specifically are the taxes and rates. So currently, we've built a budget recommendation based around a 50-50 tax rate, which is a 1.5 penny increase over the current 49-cent tax rate. We've baked in a cost of living adjustment at 4%. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the general fund and other funds. We'll talk about the 401k match. Currently, FY25, we're recommending a pause, so maintaining that 2% match. Again, Brian alluded to this. There is one FTE addition in the general fund that is a downtown police officer. And we will discuss some of the removed or constricted operating and capital budgets, decisions that we made during the budget process. So the FY23 estimate to actual, in total, our actuals were 1.04 million or 5.1% over our estimate. And that's actually really good news. We were pleasantly surprised. And the factors playing into that $1.04 million overage are unforeseen property tax growth. So growth and development in FY23 was strong. Sales tax was budgeted conservatively, so the majority of that overage is attributable to the $599,000 increase in sales tax, which we did not just save, we leveraged for current year, FY23 current year priority items. And then finally of note is an investment earnings, $106,000 over budget. So that was conservatively estimated, and due to interest rate changes starting in FY23, we received more investment earnings than we anticipated. During that year, We leveraged our increased revenues for paying class items. We also began changing the merit-based pay system. So just as a reminder, our target is to get to a 1 for achieves, a 3 for exceeds, and a 5 for outstanding. But in FY23, we moved those percentages to 1, 2, and 3 respectively. We began full payments on Safer Grant number 2 firefighters. That was 12 firefighters. And we added 13 full-time positions. So got those highlighted. It is a police sergeant, an officer, a deputy fire chief, IT manager, communications coordinator, budget analyst, sustainability manager, and a 6-person street maintenance crew. Looking at debt service, we began paying on the principal amount for the police department. We began paying interest on Edwards Park, Fire Station 1, the ladder and engine replacements, and also the City Hall exterior project, as well as other vehicles and equipment. Finally, some operating items that began in FY23 were the Parks Master Plan, Comprehensive Plan, payments on an embedded clinician for the fire and police departments, and paving cut repairs out of the general fund. So
I have a question. The paving cut repairs, those are typically revolving, right, though?
yeah, so this agreement was between the general fund and the water sewer fund. So we've got a new crew in the general fund that does work specifically related to maintaining cuts following utility work. So it's separate from the PAL bill funding for street resurfacing.
Who does that? Who does the paving cuts and stuff?
So our water sewer team, when they go out and cut a utility line, will do a cut, and then they'll call our general fund team, the streets crews out to do the asphalt repair at the end of the project.
So it's like 2.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's actually not coming from the water and sewer fund.
It's
Water
so
sewer pays for them to come out.
we
They pay on a per square foot basis, I believe.
we bill them as if they were an outside firm based
So-
on rates.
But you said your general fund crew.
So-
So I'm just a little lost about that.
So basically, instead of it's basically instead of contracting with an outside paving company, instead of water and sewer fund contracting with an outside company, they're contracting with our street department
Okay.
crew to do their pavement cut repairs. So that's really, so,
Which keeps that transparent, is that it's.
yeah, that's right. So water and sewer, because what we've seen is we've really, from a positive, well, they're both positive, but what we've seen is our water and sewer department has really stepped up on making leak repairs to try to reduce that. So you're seeing more cuts, hence fix the damn streets, on social media. And so we had to beef up our street department to make those. So there's more cuts out there, so we're having to make more repairs, which, so what we did is to compensate the general fund, water and sewers paying the general fund to do that work.
Thank you.
Is that accurate?
That's correct, yeah. And one thing, Adam, I just want to point out on here, the total expenditure estimate to actual, that's a higher number than we've historically seen. We've typically been on the negative, right? So our actuals came in below our estimates, and they've normally been very close. What we're seeing here is the addition of that paying class at mid-year really ramped up the spending that we had for the remainder of the year, where our estimate was based on a budget that we did not foresee that increase coming from the paying class change.
Yep, thanks for that, John and Brian. And then just moving on to the other section. So that's where the majority of the large percent changes occurred. So in FY23, we began reorganizing our ARP funds. So you'll notice transfers in and out of the general fund to the special revenue fund, just trying to accurately record what was going on with ARP at the time. So that's the majority of that change in the other section. And then finally, would just note that we appropriated 1.8 million in fund balance, the percent change of estimate to actual was 1.8 million. So we Yeah, we appropriated fund balance related to ARP funding.
We didn't appropriate. We put fund balance back. So our fund balance increased by $2 million, mainly due to the ARP money that we were stashing in the general fund balance.
So if there aren't any questions on FY23, we can move into the FY25 budget process. And we'll start with the revenue side of the equation for the general fund. So looking mostly at the FY24, the current year revised budget compared to the recommendations for next year, our total property tax revenue is a 12.3% increase, which is $1.7 million. And that's based on, again, the 49-cent current property tax rate, changing to 50/50 per $100 of assessed valuation. We also included in this property tax budget revenues from developments that Brian discussed earlier. So Jable, a portion of that revenue is available. So we will receive 20% of their taxable value through the end of their incentive payment. And then Eli Lilly will pay us approximately $447,000 beginning in FY25. So our total assessed value growth of real property in FY25 is 4.46%.
Adam,
Yes.
so these figures that you're giving us, these are your estimated value based on what you think that we may get,
So
these amounts?
yes, that
Or when you put these in your portals, and then it estimated for you, this is how you come up with this. So this is what we hope to get, right?
yes, ma'am.
This is an estimated budget.
The county provides assessed values, so they, in their April report, sent us those assessed values, so we can very reasonably anticipate that will be accurate. Yes, ma'am. Moving on and looking at some more of the specifics around property tax, just wanted to provide council a history of the tax rate for the city of Hendersonville. So back in FY19, 20, and 21, our property tax rate was 49 cents. And in FY22, 23, we moved that to the 52 cent per $100 valuation level, mostly attributable to payments on saver grants. So there were a lot of discussions about funding those 12 firefighter positions back in those fiscal years. And the model recommended the tax rate go to 52 cent for those payments. In FY24, which is a reval year, we changed the tax rate back down to 49 cents. And again, our recommendation in FY25 is to add a penny and a half and go to the 50/50 rate. Our assessed value has changed significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. So in FY19, we were at 1.8 billion. And again, based on the county's assessed values offered in April, we're looking at 3.2 billion in assessed value in FY25. Majority of changes in assessed value happen during revaluation years, so that is the county's responsibility, but you'll notice the largest percent changes during those revaluation years, which are presented on this next slide. So the teal bars represent non-revaluation years, so most of the growth recorded in those years is due to development. And in the gray years, again, that's the revaluation process. So based on the economic developments that have happened during FY24, we anticipate 7.21% growth in our assessed value in FY25. And we just want to say that, you know, FY21 to 23 were a little low, so those are rookie numbers. We hope to pump those up and stay at the 7% level. The 7.21% growth is comparable to some of the early 2000s, so specifically just highlighted 04 through 07. If you average those years out, the growth was 7.2%.
One thing I want to hit on here, Adam, is a lot of those developments that are coming online were approved in the 21, 22 area from city council. So it does take some time from that entitlement to see what developments are actually going to go under construction. And appreciate Lou's team for all the hard work we've been doing for tracking what's going on there, what the activity is, so we have good expectations of what future revenue growth might look like for the city and what programs and services we might need to fund that. Additionally, again, if I could reference the post Great Recession years, you can see how minimal that growth was. And if you think about the Venn diagram, really we had not many options during these years besides raising taxes or cutting services. And in reality, we weren't going to be cutting services for our residents. So that's where you see the tax rate growth over those years. We also lost other revenue options that we used to have that were taken away by the General Assembly through that time period as well. So that is one good explanation for why tax rates have increased so much over those years.
And I would just, add as part of our conversation, this is a greater conversation that you'll continue to have going forward, again, with our counterparts at the county and for our residents outside of the city limits. It's critical that, the city maintains the posture that we're able to grow. And we have the reasonable ability to grow, nothing extravagant, but you've got to have room to grow to build that tax base. You can do that through density, but it's also important to also have at least a small ability to develop greenfield or new development right outside the corporate, grow the corporate limits, because that is how we grow, and that's how we provide revenue and provide excellent services. We provide those services to most of the county. And so, and I'm preaching to the choir with the city council, but I'm hoping folks outside in the world through Zoom are hearing that, that's why the city has to grow. Reasonable growth boundary is important to us, and it's important that we grow, because we do provide that service to, we're only 16,000, but, our commercial area serves 90,000. So it's important to do that. And the reason that we draw those lines in the sand, that we got to be able to grow. And so I think that's just important to keep that out there and important. So,
John, the obvious part of it is the average is 36% and we're 14%.
That's
not
exactly
even
right.
half.
That's right.
Which we don't, I know I don't aspire to hit 36, in my lifetime of seeing it or whatever, but 14% is just, it's unreasonable, and we certainly have right and a need to be able to grow outside of that somewhat, because we entertain everyone in the city.
That's exactly right.
I was going to ask, do we have, probably somebody does, numbers as far as how much tax exempt property exists in the county versus in the city? Do we have any of those
We
numbers?
could pull that. We don't have it readily available. We can get that. That's a good
I think we have
idea.
a really high percentage of tax exempt property. And, one of the discussions I have even with county commissioners is, everybody uses, they come to the city and they go to church here and they see doctors here, their kids go to school here.
Grocery
and,
shop.
like all of those things. And while it makes Hendersonville really great, it does really diminish our capabilities to, so
Yeah, it's really the
being
question.
reasonable about our expectations, I think, is important.
Absolutely. It's who pays for services, right?
Right.
If we can't grow and we only have the property tax, it's going to fall on the backs of the people who sleep in the city every night and the businesses of the city.
If we could get that number at some point, I would just like to see it.
Yeah, we can definitely pull that. Maybe today. I don't know. I don't want to overpromise.
I might know a guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have the data. And this is also a case for, a quarter-cent sales tax, other revenue options, right? We don't have other revenue options. We don't have a capacity to have the tourists or the transient visitors help pay for the services that are required for the citizens here in Henderson County.
And I'll, just remind, as the city grows, it also benefits the county. The county grows because, our tax base grows, but, we provide the services, and it increases the tax base countywide. So that's positive for the county citizens too. So.
So good thoughts, everybody. I just do want to provide one last slide on the property tax rate. So we are providing the FY24 assessed value of some properties that we picked out of our GIS maps, the county GIS maps, excuse me, and are looking at the total annual payment and property tax for those properties at various values. So we've included commercial, industrial, and residential properties. Again, just pulled some data out of GIS. So for a $223,800 assessed residential property, for example, at a 49-cent tax rate, you are paying $1,097 annually. And if we look at a 52-cent tax rate, you're looking at a $67 annual increase, which comes out to about $5.60 a month. Obviously, the higher you go in property assessed value, the more that dollar amount is reflected. But changing the 49-cent rate to a 52-cent rate for a $649,000 property would result in a $195 annual increase, which is $1,623 a month. And then finally, if you are really making it and you've got a $4 million property out there, a 49-cent tax rate versus a 52-cent tax rate results in a $1,205 a month, or sorry, a year increase, which comes out to $100.45 a month. So just for your consideration there. And we'll move on to unrestricted intergovernmental revenue sources. And the biggest piece of this revenue source is the sales tax. So based on some of the slow growth we've seen in sales tax in FY24, we're being very, very conservative with our growth in FY25. Therefore, we're only recommending 2.6% or $200,000 increase in the total unrestricted category for FY25. So of that 200,000, 110 is from sales tax increases. So most of that 1.75% growth in sales tax is attributable to the changes that we saw in reval. So based on changes in assessed value in the county, we get a slightly larger share of sales tax that's provided in Henderson County. And then we're also looking at an increase in ABC revenues and our utility sales tax revenues.
Adam, let me mention one thing for Melinda's benefit. So sales tax, and give me the specific numbers, but we pay in North Carolina, what are we paying? What's the
6.75.
6.75% of sales tax in North Carolina. 2.75 come back to us. Is that right? How much of that comes back to us? Two. Just two. So two pennies of that come back to us. It is distributed in the county based on our ad valorem, based on how much tax base we have, plus the tax levy. It's a complicated formula, and Brian can give you a great dissertation on it, but basically it's based on our tax base, and versus the county has two options to distribute it: by capita, by population, or by tax base, and the county has chosen to do it by tax base, basically ad valorem tax base. So that money is distributed back to us. But it also takes into account how sales tax is spent across the state. Part of it is local sales tax, part of it is statewide sales tax, and it's distributed back to us. And it's what we call a very elastic. If the economy is good, typically we see growth. If we go into a recession, it backs up. So it's not a static tax base. Sometimes it'll shrink on us, so we try not to count on it. I mean, we try to be conservative when we're budgeting with them. We try to watch the economy so that they can estimate how much of that money we're going to get, either growth or if there's a reduction. So I want to clean that up any. I mean,
that was good. The only thing I'd add is we're budgeting a very tight, like statewide look. We're not showing a bunch of increase in sales tax from that perspective. We're just showing the increase of our local distribution is increasing a little bit.
So the point that, sales tax plus you'll see us mention investments. The investment money is another elastic revenue that either grows or shrinks. So it's the only constant revenue we have is our property tax. So that's the only thing that's kind of guaranteed in when we're doing our estimation, because we try to get good estimates there. So that's what you see there. So just want to make a point about the sales tax.
Can I add too that Henderson County could actually lever an additional quarter cent that the General Assembly would allow us to do, or the state would allow us to do. And we actually sent a letter to the General Assembly 2 or 3 years ago now, I think,
We've done it a couple years in a row. Yeah, 2 or 3 years in a row.
requesting to be able to lobby that extra quarter cent. What is the quarter cent? What is the value of that on our tax rate? Do you recall that?
So the estimate is like $3.5 million annually. It's significant. We don't have the data to specifically pinpoint what it will be because the state stopped collecting that data. So we are basing that off of 2008 numbers back when they used to collect that data and adding some growth percentages to it. But it's substantial. It's $3.5 million from our estimate, probably a little more.
Which would, I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's over like 10 pennies on the tax rate.
That's an if.
Unfortunately, it's a big if. Our folks in Raleigh have not been willing to do that for any city. We'll continue to ask, but it's not received.
Maybe we could ask again this year.
Absolutely.
So it hadn't been done anywhere.
It's not been done
I
anywhere.
didn't realize that.
No.
It is authorized in a couple.
Well, but not recent.
Not
yeah,
recent.
Not
It's
recently.
older legislation.
It's old. I don't know that it's been done since the Republican majority has, it's not been done since 2011. So it's not moved forward. Some places had it prior to that.
So it makes sense to me that we do not include that in our budget.
Oh,
because we're not dependent on those funds.
That's not
Right.
included.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's like Santa Claus.
it is. It's
Count on that one.
we keep wishing and we keep asking and maybe one day. So
Well, maybe since I'm here, I'll wave my magic wand and it'll happen.
there you go.
Bringing us good luck.
So because sales tax is so important, we've included a few more slides on it. So just giving you a feel for the current year budget and actuals so far. We budgeted for the general fund specifically a total collection of $5.9 million. Right now, based on the current collections we've seen so far in our remainder of the year estimates, we're anticipating $5.7 million. So a slight decrease from budget to actual and estimate. And our next year target, our next year estimate is 6 million, almost on the dot. So that 1.75% increase is figured in here. Just getting through some of the specific history of sales tax in Hendersonville, you can see by the blue line our actual collections. The orange dotted line is our moving average forecast, and the teal sort of filled in shaded area in the background is our tax refunds. So it's a little hard to see on this slide, but this is pointing at the fact that the sales tax growth is slowing in FY24, and it's a little more visible on this slide, although the colors really pop on this presentation. So in FY24, which has not been the typical history, just looking back 4 or 5 years, we've received collections pretty consistently under 10%. We have not had a 10% year over year growth period just yet. We've actually had 2 periods, which I believe were September and January collections, that were lower than the same period in the prior fiscal year. So that just highlights a little bit better that the sales tax growth is shrinking. And I do want to clarify, I think John already hit on it, but this isn't a Hendersonville specific issue. So sales tax is a statewide revenue source for all local governments. And due to the very complicated way the state collects and distributes sales tax, we're seeing a statewide regression in that revenue source for both cities and counties.
And I have to give Adam credit and Jenny. I mean, we're constantly looking at economic factors and listening to economists to try to gauge what's going to happen going forward. So.
Is there any way to track sales tax data downtown?
There is, but the state doesn't provide that information. All the taxes are remitted by the businesses to the state directly. So the state could hypothetically do that, but we don't receive that type of information.
I know I've been requesting some TDA data from Michelle Owens, and she's provided some just reports statewide, just as far as tourism numbers being down. And so I just think that's also important to be able to report to our folks downtown about just the economic numbers overall. So
We can do it.
thank you.
And so, locally, because this is such an important thing, we wanted to highlight that, we need a hero to really help us out with sales tax. Maybe there's a local attraction that can boost our sales tax revenues locally. And I do want to highlight that based on the Association of County Commissioners estimate, this isn't actuals yet, the March 24 collections, which was February's sales that we'll receive in May. I know that's a lot. We'll receive this revenue in May. If this estimate is correct, it'll be $81,000 over the same period last year, and $55,000 over what our estimate was for the period this year. So we hope that this is the actual collection that we receive, and we hope that trend continues, because we could really use that sales tax revenue to help with some opportunities. And then just moving on to restricted intergovernmental, this source is mostly PAL bills. So current year budget is $515,913 for PAL bill revenue. We actually have received that. And based on the state's increase in their appropriation pot, we're anticipating $560,000 of PAL bill revenue in FY25. So we have budgeted for that.
Adam, real quick,
yes.
for Melinda, PAL bill is gas tax money. It comes back and we have to use it for on streets and sidewalks and things. It's restricted money we get back from the state, but it's a portion of the gas tax that we all pay, but it comes back to the cities based on street mileage, and there's a population component too, right? So we get a proportionate share of the gas tax to support city maintained streets. So when you hear us say PAL bill, it's part of the gas tax that supports city maintained streets.
What kind of impact are the e-vehicles having on revenue from gas PAL? And that was created so we would all help maintain the roads. If they're not having to put any money in that, how are they working with that?
So what the state is doing is, so PAL bill used to be totally proportionate share of the gas tax. They've moved it. If I'm correct about this, y'all, instead of it being directly tied to the gas tax, it's now a direct appropriation from the state. So the state is not only using the gas tax to fund PAL bill, but also motor vehicle transfer fees. And so when you buy a vehicle, that money goes into the general fund of the state. And the state now it's a direct appropriation. So instead of just tying it specifically to the gas tax, they're tying it to multiple revenue sources: gas tax, transfer fees when you buy a vehicle, taxes, I think vehicle rental fees, all this. So they have pulled it out, but there is a concern long term about road maintenance in North Carolina, because it has historically been tied directly to the gas tax, and the state's going to have to cross that bridge and figure out how highway projects.
Because a gas-operated vehicle, if they're paying the same percentage in the purchase price
Yeah,
as an EV,
yeah,
there's an imbalance there because then they don't have to pay on anything on the gas tax.
that's right.
So, and there's more and more of them.
Well, one of the proposals, not just in North Carolina, but all across the country, is based on the miles that you drive. And I was part of a little test group that I had a little thing that plugged into my car that automatically recorded the number of miles I drove. And that test ended over a year ago, so I don't know what the results of that were. But they were trying to get a feel for how many miles. I mean, mine's hybrid, or a plug-in hybrid, but it still was part of that test group. So I don't know that anything has come out of it yet, but they are looking at other options.
Gonna have to. It's good to know that it's looking. Thank you.
Yeah, just a little more insight on it. So this bill did not pass, but it was talked about and introduced to the General Assembly. They were introducing raising registration fees on electric vehicles and hybrids from $140 to $180, removing the $2,000 cap on highway use tax, enacting a new fee on ride sharing, but that did not pass through the Senate.
So, looking at some of the other restricted intergovernmental sources, we also have contributions from ABC law enforcement revenues. So $40,000, no change to that revenue source in FY25. And also we anticipate the same level of contribution from the sheriff's office and the school board for school resource officer service. Finally, general fund revenues, just want to move into the miscellaneous revenue sources, just because that's a large percentage change. In FY24, our budget is $135,000. However, in FY25, our recommended budget is $31,000, which is a $104,000 decrease. That's due to no contributions and donations budgeted to begin FY25, and we'll adjust to those if we are awarded. And then also we are going to change the way payments in lieu of are processed, so they will no longer be in the general fund. We're going to record those in the special revenue fund to ensure trees and sidewalks, specifically those two items, are in compliance with legislation, which requires that we use any revenue generated within the same project area. So we're actually this last week working on a map to get that accurate and prepared for FY25. So transitioning away from revenues and into expenditures, the first item that we discuss every year is personnel and benefits. So FY25's budget is a $504,000 increase, which is 3.2%. And that includes no merit-based increases, so that's all going to be built into the cost of living adjustment based on changes in the performance pay system. We do have increases that we're required to pay for ledgers, which is our retirement system as local government employees. So the general class employees will pay 0.75% more into their retirement and 1% more for police officers. So you can see that FY24's amount was 12.85 and 14.1 respectively. And in FY25, that'll move to 13.6 and 15.1. Our medical insurance, we received a 6.2% increase, and we will be eliminating the MERP. Finally, we've readjusted some salary splits across funds, which created a little savings for the general fund, but pushed some of the costs to.
I'm sorry, would you
Yes.
just explain MERP? So-
Yes. Yeah. So that's the medical expenses reimbursement program. So we as a city, contribute dollar amounts from the general fund and the water sewer fund each year to help employees pay medical expenses as part of our high deductible health plan. So anytime, I can't remember the threshold, but anytime they hit a certain threshold, we pay for some of the medical expenses on the employee's behalf.
It's a very complicated high deductible insurance program that even our third-party vendor struggled. Basically, we had a $10,000 high deductible, although the employee in the first 2,500, well, I won't get all that right, but it's a very complicated system, and it was set up 10 or 15 years ago, and with moving to Aetna, it was an opportunity to move away from it to get back to more of a traditional system. And so, I don't, Brian, you can go in more detail if you want to.
That's good. I think, Jeff, do you think more on that?
I just wanted, I knew what it was, but
Yeah.
I just felt like we should all, if we're talking about this and hoping people are listening, know what MERP is. Because it doesn't, yeah. And the reason there's no MERP is because we don't have to have.
We got a very good
we got a different
renewal
plan.
from the new plan.
Yeah.
That, is
We're
buying.
not cutting anything.
No,
It's just been
we're just
changed.
making it easier
Yeah,
from
I
an
just
administrative
wanted to
perspective.
clarify.
Yep.
Thanks.
And I'll remind council and the public that, we've had 4 or 5 very good medical insurance years where we've had either no increase or actually reduction. So we have started seeing plan utilization. More people are using it outside of COVID. So the 6.2 is a very good renewal. It could have easily been 20% or more. So very, very good renewal for us.
I do have a slide for that. It's a little out of order, but if I click over. Yep. So this is the history of our medical insurance changes year over year. So if we're on, I think this is a good point to bring up this topic, but FY20 council adopted the 50% dependent premium or 50% dependent coverage, incentive. And then we also had a 14.96% increase. FY21, we changed nothing to our health insurance program. So there was no coverage change and no change to the premium increase or decrease. 22 was a very favorable year. The premium decreased 3% and council moved to the 75% dependent coverage position. And in FY23, our premium decreased further by about 12%. FY24, there was no change, and FY25, that premium is up 6.2%. But there has been no change to coverage, although we are changing insurance providers.
Adam, one thing I want to highlight here, that those dependent coverage offerings for our staff and potential recruitment is a huge benefit. You do not see this really anywhere. I think Henderson County is also very good in this area. But $262 a month for family coverage is a steal. So it's a great benefit that the city offers. I just want to highlight that positive credit that council's invested money into.
I think the representative from the league's quote was, that's an unheard of benefit. So it's very rare that that's offered. So it's very beneficial for our employees. And then just transitioning back to the personnel and benefits conversation as a whole, did want to provide an update on the cost of living adjustment. So the current budget recommendation includes a 4% COLA. So each 1% cost of living adjustment costs the general fund about $126,000. So a 4% COLA is a $504,000 budget impact. That would bring the minimum wage of a grade 9 employee, which is our lowest grade, to $17.72 per hour. And just as a reminder, we base our COLA adjustments off of consumer price index indicators And we also began this year having a discussion about living wage. So the update on CPI, so January 23, our base year, base month, to March 2024, current, the most recent data available, that CPI is 4.4%. So it's actually outpacing the recommended cost of living adjustment. And our living wage, just as a reminder, the minimum that an outside firm told us, or 3 outside firms told us, excuse me, they were all between $22.10 an hour and $24.95 an hour, with an average of 23.35 per hour for a standard employee working 2,080 hours a year.
And to increase that minimum wage starting, and then again, not address the other, then you're dealing with more compression in salaries, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And so also wanted to mention, this was in the retreat presentation, but at some point, this continual cycle of high inflation, high wage growth has to stop. It's out of our control. The Fed is trying to intervene in the market. They're doing that by changing interest rates, which is to dumb it down the cost of borrowing money. So if money's more expensive to borrow, hopefully continual spending decreases and the spiral is cut, and we return to a more standard inflation rate, which we saw prior to the COVID era. In future years, we anticipate that a decrease, a negative growth in wages and inflation is unlikely, but I think the goal in the soft landing is disinflation, which is slowing those two factors.
I just want to talk on that for a minute too, because with the interest rates, the supply and demand for homes is not changing as well. So really, the leg or the spoke of this wheel that's going to fall out at some point is employment. That's going to be, from my perspective, the key to fixing this. And to be honest, from when I talk with John, we don't want to be the ones who end up going into layoffs or not keeping up with wages. Somebody's going to break along the way, because I don't see the supply and demand for housing and interest rates really solving this spiral.
And this, the Fed is looking at raising, and this is where I think we're in unprecedented waters, because the Fed is looking for unemployment to go up. And that's really a key indicator for them, is to get inflation down, with unemployment rates to go up. But I would argue that we all know there's not enough people working. So how does unemployment go up when there's fewer people in the workforce? People have left the workforce. So whereas traditionally they've looked at unemployment, good numbers to go up, laying off people. Well, there's companies and cities and everybody is not going to lay off people because we don't have enough people to work. So it's unprecedented, and I don't think the economists really know what's going to happen. I think this unemployment number, and that's John's opinion, but just looking at the crystal ball and trying to figure out this wage spiral, it is supply and demand in the wage sector, or in the employment sector, and there's not enough folks to work. So what do? You have to raise the salary to recruit people to come over, and then that you have to pay them more. You got to raise. So it's going to be interesting to see. But you're right, Brian's right. We are watching this very closely, because we don't want to be the one that breaks the system, at least not here locally. So
one more thing to add on the housing supply and demand side before we transition off. So because I'm looking for a house and have been for the last, seems like eternity. So our supply, or actually demand, is exceeding our supply, which is driving prices up. And I think if you look at just about any source, you'll find that the median household sale point in Henderson County is $448,000, and that's rounding it down a couple hundred. So it's not cheap to afford a $448,000 house at a 7% interest rate. I think you need like $130,000 salary to qualify. So it's not easy out there. So now that I've done doom and gloom, I'm going to move on into the operating budget, which is a little less gloom and doom. So Our FY25 recommended budget for operating is an $824,000 decrease compared to the current year revised budget. The majority of that decrease is attributable to PAL bill being transferred out of the general fund. So we're not recording PAL bill inside the general fund. We're still doing street resurfacing work, but it's just not in the general fund budget. It'll be done through the 7th Avenue Streetscape project is where we plan to use that funding. Also contributing to the decrease is the completion of the comp plan, which was $200,000, the park master plan, which was $100,000, and a street resurfacing study for $50,000. So those are non-recurring costs, which ultimately helped us formulate a lower operating budget for FY25. Some of the increases that we did want to mention, just because they point to council's strategic goal of public safety, are increases for the fire department's training academy. That's estimated at $60,000 for next year. And then we also have budget included to combat inflation related to police officer safety and outfitting them with the appropriate equipment, which is our standard. So moving into capital, that is also a reduction of $521,000 over the current year budget. However, I think the more impactful thing to note with capital is we started with just shy of $1.4 million in requests and are recommending only $233,000 in expenditures. So while the reduction year over year is high, I think the thing that staff in the room would want me to hit on is that we really, through the budget process, restricted that capital line to try to support our personnel. We did maintain some life-saving and safety equipment. So included in the budget are things like AEDs, chest compression devices, gas monitors, safety gear, camera systems, and then finally we're going to do some improvements at Oakdale and some safety and lighting improvements at Sullivan Park, as well as outfit our public works staff.
Are there still 8 vehicles included?
Yes, there are 8 police vehicles included.
How old are those vehicles that you're replacing? Are you?
I looked
adding new
recently.
vehicles?
We're replacing 2018s, I believe. But Chief, please jump in if I'm off on that. But I think that's what I looked at recently. Is we're kind of at our 2017-18 range and pulling those out of service.
Also, not to our fault, we had several vehicles totaled this past year. People running red lights, hitting our own. I don't know why our police vehicles have these targets on them, but we seem to have these magnetic targets that people will run red lights and hit our vehicles. So I know we've had at least 2 vehicles totaled because of people running red lights. So
Count to 5, right, Chief? Count to 5 after the light turns green, then go.
Well, yeah.
I watched him almost get hit on Main Street.
So the totaled vehicles, are they included in the $520,000 budget impact for 8 new vehicles?
No, ma'am. So those will be purchased through a capital project ordinance. We're going to fund those with debt. So we'll have John B., our finance director, he'll go out for a loan, and that'll be recorded outside the general fund. However, future year, the debt service that we'll pay on those vehicles is included in the budget for next year.
And then what happens to the vehicles that you're replacing?
We sell them.
And then is that number included anywhere in?
It is. So we've built our program around a loan structure for our vehicles. I think we have 8 years useful life on our police vehicles, 10 for regular service trucks. And I think John is fire 8 as well. Can you remind me? There's a few that 7, 8. And essentially we sell those, put that money back in to repay the loans. So we're trying to sell the vehicles at the highest useful life on the return on investment that we can get for the vehicle, put that back into new loans for new vehicles moving forward.
If there's an 8-year kind of replacement cycle, it just seems like the last, 3 to 4 years, we're replacing tons of vehicles. Are we in just kind of like an uptick swing of the replacement vehicle time, or?
We're probably at an 8 to 10 vehicle need per year for PD. So that's
Every year?
Yeah, every year. So that's probably our regular cycle. When we add officers, that's going to increase that number.
Okay.
And we started this a while back. I
Oh, yeah,
remember
to take
how we
up-
did this rotation because it showed that it actually saved money to do it in a defined rotation when you got rid of the vehicles when they still had some value,
Value,
you could
that's right.
recover it.
Instead of running them into the
Till
ground.
they fell apart.
Until they fell, but these, so.
You started having more maintenance costs.
Yeah, I'm going to say there was a real reason behind it, the way that we were going to do the rotation.
The rate of return or investment return diminishes dramatically after those 7 or 8 years because of maintenance costs and resale value of the vehicles.
And that was tracked down on the average mileage, everything about it. So I remember we worked on that and it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, and we don't include this in our PAYGO capital model, so that decreases all other capital. You know, these are our officers' offices day in and day out, and we find it really important to kind of categorize that separately and make sure we're funding that at a sustainable level.
And I'll give Public Works kudos, not only with the fleet maintenance, but also they are regularly putting our surplus on gov deals, which helps the bottom line in the budget every year. That's additional revenue. It's not always accounted for. That really helps. So,
Adam, in our budget, we have factored vandalism for like the cemetery and the park. That's included because, you know, that's recurring.
Yeah, that's would be in our operating budget. We have regular
operating
recurring and maintenance, and then we also have a capital line for Oakdale to do, you know, broader improvements for some of the deferred maintenance out there.
And just to show some of that vehicle and equipment loan debt service. So the vehicles we purchased this year and the FY24 capital project will begin paying debt service next year. So that's an additional $303,000. We'll also begin paying debt service, principal payments on City Hall and Ops renovation projects. And we also have some accounting related items. Governmental Accounting Standards Board says we have to pay software and certain IT leases out of debt service and treat those like debt. So there is an increase in FY25 for those items.
Those items would typically just be categorized in operating, but just due to the changes on the accounting board, we have to classify them as debt.
And finally, we do anticipate some final payments next year on enterprise lease vehicles, which is how we began this updated fleet replacement schedule. So we will have the option to purchase those vehicles in FY25 for their residual value. That brings us to the other category. So everything that occurs below the line.
let me mention right here, it's 10 o'clock. Do you want to take a break real quick? Is that give everybody a break? Let's take a break if we can. And
Yeah.
Yes.
10 minutes.
Yes, because my head's spinning.
what?
We'll be on break.
she's good. So, Adam, you may continue.
Alrighty. So when we left off, we were going to enter the discussion about the other category, so everything that happens below the typical revenue and expenditure lines. So FY25's budget is a total, looking at all of the others, is a total of $1 million in increases over the FY24 revised level. Some of the things that are pushing that change in FY25, we're estimating the sale of the fire department's old ladder and old engine, which have been replaced. So we anticipate a revenue of $350,000 this year for that sale. And then also attributing to that difference is, again, the PAL bill and 7th Avenue transfers, which will total $634,000 for the 7th Avenue Streetscape project. We also anticipate about $87,000 dollar transfer to the Environmental Services Fund and $194,000 transfer for the parking fund. Some of the other items in FY25, we also anticipate the sale of the fire department annex, which was used during the construction of Fire Station 1. And we're anticipating some potential transfer ins pending the end of FY24 and the audit process, transfers into the general fund from parking, stormwater, and environmental services related to the general fund covering their prior expenditure overages identified through the audit. So some of those may not be needed, just depending on how our actuals end for FY24. And that brings us to fund balance. So just tying it all out, the fund balance is a decrease of $1.2 million compared to the FY24 revised level budget. That's a 32.8% decrease. The appropriation. Yep. Sorry. So the appropriation, it will bring our fund balance estimated down to about $10.7 million, and that's assuming a 96.5 expenditure and 103% revenue collection in FY25. So we anticipate in FY25, our estimate is that we'll use $282,000 by the end of the year, leaving us with a FY25 end of year balance of $10.4 million. And at that position, our unassigned would be just shy of 6.2, which would be a 23.29% available mark. And just as a reminder, Brian's already covered this, and we'll go over it in the general fund model. But that target is 25%. So we will, if this estimate proves accurate, we would be just shy of the LGC's target.
Math's never been my strong point, but how do you have 103% revenue collection? 103%.
So that's attributed to the conservative budgeting. And Jeff.
So it's just a conservative piece in your thing. Okay.
Yep. So
I thought that was a trick.
yeah, sales tax in prior years has been the main contributor to that.
All right. It's just dealing off of projections, not reals.
Correct. Yep.
I get it. Oh.
Yeah. And that all ties out to Brian's Hamlet quote again. So do you want to take that one over, Brian, or?
Yeah, and we'll jump into the model here, but really, what we're seeing right now is the base level expenditure growth is really hard to keep up with from just our base level revenue growth. So without new revenue options, we're going to be tight on services, tight on capital, tight on new programs, new initiatives. But we're going to talk about the general fund model. Just dropped in a snippet from the slide from the retreat to remind us of all the different inflationary and personnel requirements that are increasing our baseline budgets. So moving into the model.
I had
Yes,
some questions.
ma'am.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
The health care dependent coverage, do you know roughly a monetary value of what that is equivalent to for an employee?
Yeah, so annually, if an employee gets on our family plan, that's $20,000 that the city is paying for that employee.
How much less does the employee pay?
They only pay 25%.
I guess I was wondering, is there a dollar amount roughly? of,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
What that would
Get a quick,
equal to?
Times 0.2.
they pay about $5,000.
Yep, so we're taking about $15,000 of expense out of their scope of responsibility. The city's paying 15.
And I want to correct that. This 5,000 is not the correct number because we're actually we pay the full freight of the base level. So we pay 100% of the employee costs, then we pay 75% of the dependent coverage. Adam, I don't know if we could maybe go back to
And so for an
that
employee with a
slide.
family, roughly how much savings is that dollar-wise a
I
year?
think you skipped over it.
Did I? Yeah, I'm in revenue now. Thank you, Lindsay.
Oh, no.
There it is. So city cost per month. So the total cost is 1787 plus 262. The total cost per month is 2,000. Let me pull up a spreadsheet so I can track this real quick. $2,049 per month. That per year is $24,588. We're going to pay 100% of the 739 per month. So we're going to pay that outright for the employee. The difference of the 739 from the 2,049 is $1,310, and we're paying 75% of that. So it'd be $1,310 a month for that family coverage.
And of that, we're paying 70
We're paying 75%, yeah.
of that too, right?
So we pay 100% of the $739, and then we pay the additional
Saving-
75%.
no.
The savings to the employee, right, is,
The savings
Yeah.
for the employee per month is how much? What's the dollar amount?
let me get it. The savings is $982 per month.
$982 a month.
750, that's even more.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That was a good challenge. Math on the fly is always fun. All right. The model. So this is where we're going to get into our talking points for consideration for City Council. We'll pull the model up after we go through kind of all the considerations we want to talk through prior to making any changes. Currently, we've updated the dashboard a little bit. We've added this grading section over on the right, and that's reflective of how many red boxes are showing amongst our indicators. So according to those number of red boxes, we're artificially saying this is a B plus, decent financial condition. We'd really like to be at an A from a sustainability perspective, but this is where we are currently. Melinda, for your reference, we have this, and I'll run through it in more detail once I move over to this back computer, but we put all of our financials from all of our audits in this model, and then we build out our estimates of what we think is going to happen and build in percent increases for certain things, build in our capital plans for like repairs at Oakdale, that type of stuff. And we push it out, I think it goes out to 2060. That's not very reasonable, but we push it out that far. And then we track our ratios based on what the model's showing. And we've got toggles essentially, so we can go in and say, hey, we want to do this $10 million parks project, or we want to give $1 million to affordable housing, whatever initiative. We can drop that in the model and it will update everything for us and show us where our indicators are. So this is kind of what we use to say, yeah, we're on the right track. We're being sustainable with the taxpayers' money, or we're spending too much. And we also have revenue options. So if you want to put something in from an expense side, we can increase the revenue concurrently to make sure the model stays in a sustainable manner. So that's why we have kind of the score up there. All those little ratios we'll explain. And then we've got kind of our tax rates on the left. Is somebody here going to have a question? Or Melinda, go ahead.
So you monitor this monthly, quarterly,
Quarterly.
and then that's when you put these figures in to your Dropbox?
Yeah, we update it. And so, for example, this current fiscal year, when we did our January update, John and I were looking at it, and Adam, we're all looking at it, and we're like, uh-oh, these these numbers aren't looking good. So that's when John put into place hiring freezes and capital freezes and things like that. So it's a tool for us to manage the budget.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I think I'm still actually a couple slides back. I have
You're
one
good.
more question about the turnover and vacancy rates.
Yes.
So the turnover and vacancy rates were 7.5, no, sorry,
0.6 and 2.3%. That equates to 1.8 people or 7.5 people
Okay.
per month.
And then, but that was like last year. Do you know where we stand this year with that same number, or do we have like a?
We have 1 quarter of data, but I have not looked at it.
Okay.
This is a calendar year look.
Oh, okay.
2023 calendar. Yeah, so this is
Alright.
January 1st, 23 through December 31st. I know we jump around and
Okay, I was
how we classify years.
adding up to me. Okay.
Yeah.
And then are the vacancies in the police department and the fire department, they're included in that number?
That's correct. That's predominantly what's going to be in that number. Yeah. Yeah. If you look at our website, you'll typically see about 8 positions every month, and
Okay.
a good portion of those would be fire and police.
Okay.
And those numbers, just being honest, those are as of 2023. We've seen an uptick in 2020, in the first half of 2024 in the number of vacancies. Our numbers are going up. I know, because I know the police department is going to have four,
Yeah.
and I think we're going to see similar in the fire department, in fire. So those numbers are going up as we go forward.
Okay. And so that would be for the first quarter of this year then?
Yep.
Is it possible to get
First and
that
second
number?
quarter.
Yeah.
At
I
some
can get
point
that number
today?
today. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, since I'm the new kid on the block, please, and you use a lot of acronyms.
Yes, ma'am.
Please tell me what LESA is.
Law Enforcement Separation Allowance. It's a retirement benefit that the state mandates we provide to law enforcement officers. So they get a special allowance once they retire with the city until, I think, 62 years.
Until they reach Social Security. So
Not
Medicare.
No.
Just 62.
Just 62, yeah.
Just 62. Okay.
Those turnover vacancy rates were really low in 2023 compared to other years. Is that what I read?
Yes, they were doing really well. I think the paying class and the dependent coverages and those types of things that we were investing in the employees the year before were reflective of what we were seeing in 2023.
And now we think it's probably going up because of cost of living.
Yeah, I think cost of living, living wage, just that spiral we talked about. We're seeing people with a wage war concept, out there. We've got people raising wages aggressively. Henderson County did that most recently in their last budget. So that's what we're dealing with.
It's not unique to us. It's statewide. People are, because there's limited folks, particularly in the public safety realm. There's limited, supply and demand. There's limited supply in the public safety realm, police and fire particularly. Not a lot of folks are doing that, and so municipalities particularly are raising salaries, and their people are leaving and those kind of things. So it's a double whammy with cost of living in our region plus raising of salaries.
All right. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to get back here, Melinda. The top left is our tax rate over the years. So that's showing what the tax rate needs to be to support that financial ratios on the right. It also shows the value of a penny. That's always useful in thinking through, do you want to add services? How much does that service cost? And that gives you, well, how many pennies do I need to raise to provide that service or that project? So our value of a penny for FY25 is about $325,000. So for every penny, you would get $325,000 to spend, essentially. Another thing in here shows our growth, and you can see that 7.22% assessed value growth. That's really strong, like we talked about earlier. You can see we add in the growth rate from development, so you can see the future year. We've got about 7.79% and 5.36. So these are really strong growth numbers. We haven't seen this in 20 years, so this is very beneficial. We need to get through kind of the tight time we're in right now, but we do see a light at the end of the tunnel based on the developments coming in the future years here. The bottom graph in the bottom left is our fund balance. Total is both the gray and the green. Gray being total fund balance, right, and the green being available for spending. And then our target percentage is the orange bar and the red is the target. So the orange is our actual percentage available. The red is the target. You can see we fall slightly below under this model and then come back out of it with the future growth of the conservative capital program is what's helping with this as well. On the middle shows the amount of dollars that we are above or below our target. So you can see in 25, we're about $500,000 below our target, but we can come back out of that in 26. And then on the bottom right are our net earnings year over year. So you can think of this kind of as the operating ratio. You can see we were trending negative balances, but getting back into the positive realm. So that kind of V shape is reflective of those graphs as well. So what's included in the model? Since the model is so big, we're going to do some slides here and then we'll pull it up. The tax rate of 50.5 cents, 4% COLA. The scores are 23.29% available fund balance, minus 0.9% operating ratio, so about that $200,000 deficit Adam was looking at earlier. Very low capital ratio, 0.85% of total expenditures are being invested in PAYGO capital, $224,000. Our debt ratio is slightly above our indicator of 15%, about $4 million annually. And our assessed value is actually really strong at 7.22%. So that's the scorecard there on item 3. What's included from a major projects perspective in the past, Melinda, this would have included things like police station, Edwards Park, and different things like that that we've been doing recently. Right now, all it includes is our basic vehicle and equipment loans. It includes one person, so one HPD downtown officer is included in the budget. It does not include the personnel we know that's needed in the future, from zoning enforcement to public works to police and fire. So this is not inclusive of all the personnel needs that are out there. Some of the other variables are selling the fire station annex, like Adam mentioned, cut repair paybacks for water and sewer. The capital ratio, we increased that in FY27. So we have one more year of tight capital, and then FY27, we would get back to a more standard year of capital budgeting. And the local sales tax distribution that Adam talked about, we've built that in here as well. And then lastly, the real positive takeaway, right, for future years is there's approximately $2.7 million in new tax revenue through FY28, or equivalent of 6 pennies on the tax rate from development within the city limits. So want to talk about all these considerations. So we'll run through each of these. So there's 4 of them we're going to run through. Living wage challenges is what we'll start with. We'll talk through future year projects that we know are in discussion, but not in the model. So we know there's discussions about general obligation bonds for housing, transportation, or parks. We know Whitmire and Patton are kind of reaching a limit of deferred maintenance and may need additional attention. And we know fire substation number 3 will be needed at some point in the future, but we'll have some information on that as well. Future personnel needs from cost of livings and new personnel are not included right now. And then other revenues, so we can build in payments in lieu of taxes, coruscant sales taxes, motor vehicle fees to show what those would do to help fund services for the city. So to start, we know there's been an interest in options for COLAs to help keep us up with that wage war, essentially. So just some base information, each 1% on the COLA is about $125,000 in cost for the full city. Our pre-pandemic growth for COLA, costs of living, personnel and benefits costs, so like 2015 to 2020 was about 4.29% year over year growth on average. What we've seen post-pandemic has been averaging 11.5%. And the chart on the right lays out 2 different options for additional COLAs. So we have baseline, which is the 50.5 cents and 4% COLA for everyone. We have one option that would target public safety personnel, so sworn police officers and firefighters working the 2756 hours. That would be a 1% increase for COLA for everyone, a 5% COLA increase for PD, and a 5% for fire. So everyone would get 5, and then police and fire, sworn officers and firefighters would receive 10% under that model. And then option 2 would be 7.5% for everyone. Those are at the 52-cent tax rate. One thing to highlight on here is we have our annual pay by worker type for a public works worker, a firefighter, and a police officer. Their grades, their annual hours, and then their actual annual pay. So in 23, public works worker entry level was making 34.4, firefighter was 41.8, and a police officer was 43.9. And on the very bottom is the living wage. The living wage at the time was 35.10. We had met the living wage with probation completion at this point. One thing to note is living wage has increased dramatically. In FY25, we're expecting a living wage of $47,861. And you can see the prospective public works worker at 36.8, firefighter 48.48, police officer 47. So all of these under the living wage at the 4% COLA. So option one, the 10% for police and fire would put firefighters at 47,385 and would put police officers at 49,754 and public works at 37,212 at the 5%. Option two on the 7.5% for everyone would be 38, 46.3 and 48.6 respectively. I'm going to get into comparables. Does anyone have any questions on that top row of information? Okay. So comparables, I've got Asheville PD, Asheville Fire, Henderson County Sheriff's Office, Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, Fletcher PD, Laurel Park PD, and of course the living wage at the bottom. When we get over in here, I'm just going to go straight to option 1 and 2. Well, no, I'm going to go to their totals. So FY25, based on their COLAs, we're expecting Asheville PD to be at 49.4, Asheville Fire to be at 48.1, Henderson County Sheriff 53.9, about 54, well in the lead. Buncombe County Sheriff 48.9, Fletcher 47.2, and Laurel Park 42.65. So that is just their salaries. And then the dollar difference is on the next chart. The negative would be we are behind that organization. The positive, we would be ahead of that organization. So under the 10% for public safety option 1, we would be $300 ahead of Asheville PD. About firefighters would be about $700 behind Asheville Fire. Henderson County Sheriff would be up on us about $4,200. Buncombe County Sheriff, we'd be ahead by $800. We'd be ahead of Laurel Park by almost $10,000 and Fletcher by $2,500. Under the other option, we fall behind in the areas outside of Fletcher and Laurel Park. With this information, we knew we wanted to present options for council to consider to keep up with this wage growth. And we'd be seeking your direction today on how we'd want to move forward.
I think the only thing that I would add here, and this is for the council and the management team behind me, this is a break from tradition and break from the pay equity model that we have used traditionally in local government, particularly here in Hendersonville. But I feel like I'll be honest with you, from the city manager, we are in a desperate situation as it relates to option to police and fire, particularly public safety. We are in this wage war around the state. While I don't like the proposal or my recommendation, it is one I feel that is probably necessary because the alternative is to have significant openings. I feel like in police and fire, and public safety is your number one priority. So I feel like it's important. I've struggled, honestly, with making the recommendation in my mind because it does move away from the pay equity, but it's something that managers all across the state are having to move to is focusing on those two departments during this current trend as it relates to. So it would be my suggestion or recommendation that you consider option 1. It's not ideal. I would prefer to keep the pay equity, and we'll support, absolutely, I'll support whatever council so desires, but just want to, based on the situation we're in, I feel like that we need to at least get the public safety, get those salaries comparable to our neighbors, because there is a limited supply, and I think, so I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have there. So.
I know when the vast majority of people looking at a position are looking at salary, but we do offer good benefits. Do you have any idea how we compare on benefits Is it pretty much equivalent across the board?
Locally, it's a Cadillac out here in Buncombe and Henderson. Really, us, Buncombe, Henderson, and Asheville all have really good benefit packages. However, us and Henderson are probably slightly better than.
We very much have a micro market in this as it relates to benefit. You will not see those benefits in other parts of the state, but to be competitive in this region, we're having to do that. So,
And we do have a commitment to, number one, public safety. And can't get people to do that, then we've kind of failed on that. So we have to make the adjustments that are necessary there. And I support what you're saying, John. I know it's tough.
I feel like I lost a page, maybe, I don't know, but, this page, this paper, this one, does it have the fire on it as well? Or is that just part of this?
It's part of the later. It was not on the original. The earlier one was just a tidbit of what police was dealing with. This later considerations page has full what we were able to find on the Asheville Fire Department as well.
So where is comparable fire?
So Asheville is looking at, currently they are at $46,257 annually. They're looking at going to $48,158 based on the proposed COLA. If you look at the media in Asheville, there's a lot of talk from Asheville Fire regarding larger increases. I have not seen anything from a budget meeting yet that indicates anything different than their proposed COLA at 4.11. So with them at 48,158, under the 10% model, we'd be at 47,385. So we'd be $700 short of their starting pay. Does that answer that question for you?
I just am a little neurotic and I like to see it on the paper. So it's hard for me to get it all together.
That one or, oh, this one here?
I'm gonna be honest, it seems like the baseline that's up there, what's currently recommended, it's not enough. And when you first showed us options 1 and 2, I had a little bit of a concern just because we weren't raising everyone's rates the same. But I think to be competitive, we kind of have to go with option 1. And if you look at the differences between like a public works worker between the two options, it's not a huge difference. So obviously I would rather see them closer to a 49, but that's not possible, but it's not a huge difference. So I think going with option 1 makes the most sense because it helps us make our firefighters and police officers more competitive. And it sounds like benefits are kind of irrelevant because everybody has great benefits. So we have to get the wages closer to match it. Or we're just going to continue this cycle, I feel like, next year.
And let me clarify one thing. By no means does this signify the importance of the job that our folks do in the variety of departments and positions. It is simply a case of supply and demand and market as it relates to where we are, as it relates to, again, truly having folks to fill these positions. So I just want to be absolutely clear that this is not indicative of importance of positions, importance of departments. Everybody is important. Everybody is doing a great job. It's just indicative of the market. So.
And I think it's important to note that we evaluate this every year. So we're triaging a little bit right now, I think, for public safety. And that doesn't mean that next year we might not be able to look at getting other people caught up or, whatever else we need to do. It's just one step in the process.
Any other input on this slide? Otherwise, we'll keep moving.
I agree with Lindsay too, but I guess and I think too, like looking at the the rate that I was looking at on the previous, like my papers. Just like the retention and job openings, I think that data is very telling. And to me, I kind of like looking at like that information to help guide your decision-making process. And if the data is showing that we are losing people in these departments due to salaries, and the data tells us that we are not losing people in these departments due to salaries, then obviously, like, raising salaries across the board is the right thing to do, but also focusing on where our data is telling us we have issues. And in my opinion, it's still probably not enough. But I think it definitely gets us to a better spot. So I wish it was actually more. 2.5% more, actually. Sorry, Jeff. I don't know.
So I wish it was.
I know.
We have to start somewhere though, and I don't want to start too low. We still have a little time to work some things out too, that maybe we can make adjustments again, but I think of the options we've been presented, option one is where I land.
All right.
And I think it just ultimately, again, we'll adopt, hopefully adopt a budget in a month, but again, time to work and those kind of things, but I'll accept that as guidance, and that's where you put the budget together, so.
Okay. More considerations. This one, more informational. This is a future type item. We know geo bonds have been discussed for parks based on the Parks Master Plan, increasing costs for NCDOT project contributions or enhancements, transportation projects, greenways, streetscapes, and housing. There is no existing funding source for these currently. So general obligation bonds would be a good strategy to fund these. However, current ratios don't put that in our sights until probably the 2028 election cycle. Unless council directed otherwise, but that from a financial sustainability approach, that's what staff would recommend. Just some information across North Carolina from 2012 to 2022, there were 213 general obligation bonds introduced. 202 of those passed, so a 98% approval for the past decade. Most of those were for public school facilities, about 60%. Community college facilities was next, parks, public transportation, and streets and sidewalks. Round that out at 8% and 4% respectively. And the approval rates, Parks and Rec has the least number of approvals to proposed referenda. And we were actually one of those during this time period. So that's just some information for reference. This is something, as we continue our strategic housing plan and finishing our parks plan and transportation plans, we'll start building in what it might look like in 2028 to issue a bond to do additional projects. Any questions on this slide? Okay. Patton and Whitmire, both of these facilities we know have quite a bit of deferred maintenance that have been were not feasible to fund in current budget cycles. Patton has about $1 million and Whitmire about $190,000. This is just baseline type maintenance items. We know there's additional potential items that might be considered, from splash pads to playground equipment and things like that, but this is just deferred maintenance. The chart on the bottom shows the insured value for each building and the loan capacity. So we have about a $3 million loan capacity for these buildings. If we did want to issue a loan and put additional resources into these deferred maintenance items into the pool in Whitmire and the pool building, that is an option. We've built this option in FY26 just to run it, and the sustainability measures are okay there. So this is certainly something to consider, but certainly not necessarily a talking or decision point until next fiscal year. But wanted to put this on the radar since we're trying to think forward-looking with this general fund model.
And this, like, pad and park costs wouldn't include any sort of part if that we might be able to go.
No, this is just a loan and then the maintenance costs. So we've got about 1.2 million in maintenance costs. We could issue a loan for about 3 million. So you'd have about 1.8 that you could use for other park related items in those parks. Any other questions on Pat and Whitmire? Okay.
Just one point, I'll be quick, just, I know parks are important. No, by no means are we going to rest on our laurels with this. I think we've shown you in the general fund, there's going to be growth out there, and we'll have the planning documents and we'll keep moving forward, but there will be opportunities. So we're kind of at the saddle point, the low point, and then we'll grow out of it. So I think
that's fair. Fire Station 3, other considerations. So before you on the slide, you can see this was the drive time analysis, GIS analysis done for each of our fire districts and the placement of fire stations. You can see how far the engine dispatch from Station 1 or Station 2 can drive within 4 minutes to meet our standard requirements for response times. And in District 10 on the slide, or District 3, the land that we purchased for the future fire station is kind of perfectly located right in the middle there. So the discussion points that we want to introduce for future years is at what point do we start construction of this station and what indicators are going to drive us to that point. So every month the fire department puts out a great report on their calls and their key performance indicators. This current information is based on the revised districts related to the apparatus being at Valley Hill, Henderson County Emergency Response, and Fire Station 2. So you see District 3 has a lot of calls. That's not necessarily reflective of the true District 3. That's reflective of dispatching from Valley Hill. So that includes places like Golden Living and the west side of Main Street and places like that, in addition to the southern side of the city. But what we'll be coming back to you with over the next year, our proposal is get everyone back into our regular districts, get people into Station 1, watch the numbers, and try to identify with council what are those indicators and when we would need to build Station 3 from a call volume perspective and a response availability perspective. So you can see, right now District 2 is running a 98% availability measure. That's really, really good. That was one of the main drivers of upstaffing and building the resources in for the fire department, was having available resources to respond. And you saw great results from a insurance rating drop with an ISO 1 insurance rating for the fire department. So our proposal right now is to evaluate this over the next year once we get back into Station 1, and then come to you all with some potentially some triggers for when we would start building a third station. Any questions? All right. The last consideration I think I have on here, maybe two more. Yeah, so street condition. We know this is a high topic. So we have the pavement condition rating. Jeff, that was the question on the operating slide. That study was $50,000 in our current year. That any day now is what Tom tells me. We should have that information. I think Wednesday they're meeting with Brandon to discuss the ratings of the streets. Our last rating was 4 years ago. On average, we were in about the 82 condition rating range. There's a snippet on our website of the street conditions from that rating. So we'll have that updated very soon. The $15 fee for motor vehicle fees that we currently have in place gets about 1 mile a year in additional street resurfacing. A couple things to keep in mind. Probably 5 to 7 years ago, we were on a 20-year repaving cycle. So every 20 years, every street in the city would have been repaved. Due to federal requirements called PROAG, or essentially updating infrastructure for ADA requirements or disability requirements, in addition to inflation and our upcoming ADA transition plan, our current cycle is getting closer to 22 years. So that is getting pushed further, the dollar is going less far and the amount of money we're bringing in from the state is not growing to keep up with the demand. So just something for consideration. If we were to add the remaining motor vehicle fee going from $15 to $30 on that registration renewal, that would bring us into about a 17-year cycle of repaving. So I just wanted to put this in here for future considerations. Any questions on streets? Okay. And lastly, our fund balance indicator is expected to drop. One thing I want to highlight here is the need for revenues to outpace expenditures, and something that we're not seeing currently in the challenges we're facing from our fund balance indicator perspective. So for every dollar spent, right? So if you're going to say, we're going to raise taxes to pay for additional COLAs, if you pay for it on a one-for-one basis, our fund balance indicator is going to drop. Currently, to keep up, you have to produce $1.25 in revenue per $1 in expenditure to maintain your available fund balance percentage, because it is a percentage of a total growth. So when you grow the expenditure, you actually have to grow the revenue at a larger cycle to keep up. So currently, under the proposed 52-cent option, we're seeing about a 0.3% drop in the available fund balance. We do know that in FY26 we'll start growing out of this. And so lastly, reflecting the 52-cent model, what our scorecard would look like, really the available fund balance is the one that changes. We are right on the edge essentially for these 3 years, 24, 25, and 26. But as you can see, in those future years, when the development comes online, we get back into a regular cycle from our financial condition where we might be a A- or a A. And that's all I have on general fund. So if there's any additional discussion or questions related to the model and those considerations we laid out before you, we'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we will move into the enterprise funds. Sounds like we're ready to move forward. Thank you, Jenny.
You're very welcome,
I totally forgot we have MSDs. These are going to be easy, hopefully. Main Street is a MSD for the downtown district along Main Street. Its budget is around $800,000 annually, and we expect the fund balance to sustain that budget moving forward. We do not have any proposed changes from personnel, operating, or capital. Debt service in this budget is a very tight budget year over year, no major changes. And it does maintain its 21-cent tax rate per $100 of value. And the one item to note is our current landscape contract will expire June 30th, 2025. So we will probably be coming back. The plan was to hire 4 full-time downtown workers over 2 years. However, just due to budgetary concerns, we want to hold those additional 2 to be hired potentially at mid-year or in March of next year to come online when that contract ends, but not spend the money until then. So this budget does not include those currently at the base level. 7th Avenue is the same, about $200,000 in budget, but no major changes. And its fund balance is projected to be transferred into the 7th Avenue Streetscape project to fund the remaining funds needed for that. Now I'm done.
All right, thank you, Brian. So we will move into enterprise funds, starting with water sewer. So the direction that we're looking for today are going to be first and foremost rate increases. Right now, the recommended rate increases are 11% for water and 12% for sewer. Something else to note is the implementation of SDFs, which will take effect January 1st at 25%. Again, the 4% cost of living increase. We are recommending 4 additional FTEs. And then we did want to note that the water rate differential is going from 130% down to 125. Looking at,
Sorry.
oh, no,
Where
go ahead.
are we in the differential? What year are we in equalization?
We're in year 5, and in FY '30, that is the year rates inside the city and outside the city will be equalized. So 5% each year until equalization. Yes.
And Melinda, for your historical on this, the city made the good faith effort to equalize the water and sewer rates. Right now, it used to be the county residents paid 150%, not double. So it's 1 scoop of ice cream and a half scoop of ice cream, right, is what they paid for water rates. The city agreed to equalize that, so it's a 1 scoop for 1 scoop in the future over a 10-year period, and we're in year 5 of that commitment to the county residents.
Yeah, because that was a concern of mine, the rate increase, how it's going to affect marginalized people and the people that's on limited income. Of course, years past, we've confronted people about this. So thank you for maybe taking that into consideration, because it will make a significant impact on them as far as their income,
And as we get on,
disposable income.
we have some recommendations.
Do we have real-life examples of, I always like that, rather than just seeing a percentage, if we could say a home using this many gallons, this
So
is what
we
it will look
do,
like?
and it'll be later in the presentation where we kind of go over holistically everything that a resident may be impacted by.
Thank you.
And Melinda, there was also a rate change in the water rate where homes that actually consume less water actually were bumped down, so in their overall rate. So smaller utilizing homes actually fell into kind of a smaller rate category. So, or I guess I should say lower rate category. You'll probably cover that.
Yeah, so it's from 0 to 3,000 gallons. It's
Yeah.
called the Lifeline. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the majority of our residential customers fall within that category.
But are our residents aware of this?
It was covered in last year's, but
We publish the schedule of rates and fees each year with budget adoption. And so that information has been made public. We've also advertised that in our various dashboards and transparency items on the city's website.
Thanks to our great communications department, we can probably do a little more to boil that down from a budget book to what a resident's going to understand and put that out there for folks.
just looking over 2023 estimate to actuals, our actual revenues ended up being just under 3% over the estimated amount, which falls in line with historical estimates. Sales and service, we saw an increase of 190,000, permits and fees for 190,000. And Adam noted before the increase in the interest rates by the Fed, we then saw an increase in our investment earnings of 218,000. On the expenditure side, we had the 75th percentile pay in class that was effective July 1st. The merit program at 1%, 2%, and 3%. We added 7 full-time positions, including 1 excavation and line maintenance crew, which was a total of 3 FTEs, 1 facilities maintenance mechanic, 2 CCTV crew members, and an environmental compliance technician. For debt service, we ended up coming in about 4.5% under the estimated amount at $144,000. For operating, we were $311,000 or 4.2% under the estimated amount. For capital, we were $848,000 over the estimated amount or 85.5%. This was due to a land acquisition for $118,000, putting water and sewer lines in the ground, and then there was a harmonics project that was $135,000, I believe.
Are there restrictions on the types of funds that governments can use for investments, or are you open across the board as far as like the type of investments you can make?
the state restricts the investments that we can participate in. There's a funny case story where a local government in California went bankrupt from doing some risky investments. So the LGC tells us essentially what we can invest in, and it's very safe investments.
What are the types of investments that we are able to invest in?
John Buchanan, do you want to come?
Yeah.
So basically, we're allowed to invest in U.S. Treasuries, agencies that are backed by the United States federal government. Commercial paper are the main ones that we invest in, and then there's a few others that are a little bit further out there, bond anticipation notes, things like that. But we're mainly invested in the first three.
Do we invest in CDs, or can we?
We can, yes.
And I guess just because right now, the higher rate of return on CDs, or at least longer-term CDs, I mean, I assume you're the finance person, you do these things, and you evaluate as you're going, and then you move things around, and that's just your job.
Right. Well, there is one other vehicle we're allowed to invest in. There's certain mutual funds that are approved by the LGC that we're allowed to invest in, one of which is the North Carolina Capital Management Trust. A lot of our money sits there a lot of the times. Right now, they're paying somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4.5%.
Okay.
So most of your rates right now are hovering between 4.5 and 5.
Yep. Okay.
So just to hammer the point home, we want to invest, but we also have to keep it fairly liquid. So from a cash flow standpoint, because the way our money comes in, like we're getting ready to get into the period where money will not be coming in. Because the tax bills go out in August. And so our lowest period of receiving revenue is really the summer months, August, and we've got to have that cash. So we can't lock it up for long periods of time. And so we keep enough liquid that we can, it's being invested, we're gaining interest. But if John needs it, particularly with large capital projects, we've got a $23 million project going on, and we got to be able to pull that money out because we'll get low on cash flow, and then as the tax bills are starting to get paid, well, our highest point will be around, December, January, February period, and so the market, our cash flow ebbs and flows based on tax revenue. Constant is utility revenues, so we look at it moving thing. I don't want to.
Which is why you see the difference in the investment earnings between the water fund and the general fund, because the general fund's peak investment period is from like November through April, May, whereas the water fund remains consistent throughout the year.
Yeah, and I appreciate these questions because a lot of folks don't pay attention to what's going on from local government investments, and a lot of local governments don't have good ways of producing this information to the public so they know what's going on. I want to thank John. He's been very proactive and innovative with our financial technologies. He's actually participating in a beta program right now to have a dashboard that's available that shows our cash flow every single day within the city of what's invested and what cash is on hand to pay our notes for large projects like French Broad. So I just want to thank John for that.
Yeah, and a fine point as it relates to cash flow, by doing what we do, I mean, the Department of Revenue got, well, I guess it was actually, I think it was Revenue and the Division of Water Quality or group as it relates to our project. They got behind, they changed software and got behind in reimbursing us for projects. And if we had not had the cash flow, we would not have been paying contractors, but we were able to, we got tight there for a little bit, but John managed it and got back onto it. We could get reimbursed by the state. So,
Well, and I appreciate that too, but I think also the taxpayers appreciate that we are, investing their money wisely and, maximizing every dollar.
Any more questions or comments on FY23? All right. So we'll move into the FY25 recommended budget for revenues. For sales and service, as the recommended budget stands now, we're looking at about $2.8 million over the FY24 revised amount. This is due to the recommended rate increases of 11% and 12%. Once again, we wanted to note that the inside-outside rate differential is decreasing from 130 to 125%, where the sewer rate differential is remaining static at 150%. As you know, last year, we implemented those new rate increases, and our consultants' recommendations were to carry that 11 and 12% over into FY25. However, through conversations regarding SDFs and notes that we got from inside and outside stakeholders, including you, the Business Advisory Committee, the Water Sewer Advisory Committee, and the Chamber, we knew that those double-digit rate increases were not very palatable. And so we wanted to see where we had flexibility. There are some things that we had to take into consideration. The first was the generous $14.3 million state grant that we received from the General Assembly for the biosolids project. Again, the implementation of SDFs at 25%. The revision of the 10-year CIP was a big factor in looking at rate increases and decreases. Utility leadership was very strategic in reducing the CIP. The total 10-year CIP in FY24 was almost $300 million. And as you can see in FY25, the adjusted level is down to $166 million. Something else that we needed to take into consideration is our revenue bond covenants. This is probably the most important indicator when we look at where we need to set water and sewer rates. There are two bond tests, A and B, and both of those ratios must be either equal to or greater than 1. So after crunching some numbers and analyzing some different options, we believe that we can confidently recommend an 8% water increase and a 9% sewer increase. As you can see, the calculated coverage for A and B remain that one, above that 1. So we wanted to put that on the table, see if you all are comfortable with that, or if you'd like us to go back to the drawing board and come back with some other options.
So basically giving Adam Stewart and his team and Jenny credit, we're able to drop those rate increases by 3 percentage points there from what our previous rate model showed. So, and I think hopefully from Melinda's comments earlier that it will benefit our folks that are on fixed income and reduce the increase on rates in their water bills. So.
Thank you, because I realize that we have to use increases in order to fund the city, but I appreciate the effort that you did take this into consideration. It just shows that you're being good stewards.
I think it would be staff's recommendation to, if council's accepted, to move forward with the 8 and the 9 versus the 11 and 12.
I do want to note that the continuing slides are still based on that 11 and 12 set recommendation because we weren't sure. But if you'd like us to follow through with any additional analysis on the 8 and 9 for the following slides, we can do that. Moving into permits and fees, again, based on that 11 and 12%, the recommended budget was 1.28 million. This is 319,000 over the FY24 revised amount. This is not going to be affected that much. We see water sewer rates again coming in January, so we're going to have about a half of year of those SDFs at 25%. And then we have inspection line fees at 50 and water sewer permits and fees at 95,000. Moving into FY25 recommended expenditures. For personnel and benefits, our recommended budget is 570,000 or 4.9% higher than the FY24 revised amount. This is due to a couple of factors. Again, that cost of living adjustment. At the 4%, we would see an increase in the fund of just under $380,000. We've readjusted salary splits to be more equitable as far as the workload for the fund. I do, again, want to note leadership within the utility. We are creating 13, or or career ladders for 13 positions to help with recruitment and retainment. And then they're repurposing 3 positions, which in the long run is actually going to result in a cost savings of about 2 FTEs. We are recommending 4 new FTEs. This is a generator maintenance technician, instrumentation and electrical technician for treatment, a water treatment plant lab tech, and then a payment posting specialist, which will be housed in finance.
Say this, as we've talked about growth in the general fund, regardless of how the city grows, the utility is growing exponentially as it relates to development countywide. So, have to look at this a little bit different because as the county continues to grow, so significant growth around as it relates to, so that's a little bit of a different growth pattern for the utility, but it's countywide very much versus just here in the city, so.
And if we went, when we were talking earlier about pay rates, if we went with the 5% for everyone, then it would be an additional 94,000 on top of the 569. Okay.
Moving into the operating budget, we are recommending the operating budget at $8.6 million. This is 808,000 or 6.9% higher than the FY24 revised level budget. Some of the call outs for this, we are going to include an overnight call center for about $45,000. This is going to ease some burden on our treatment plant workers overnight. They're also kind of acting as customer service representatives. We're seeing rate increases from Duke Energy, which is going to result in an increase in utility costs of about $300,000. We are doing a sewer system master plan for $220,000. Our sludge management this year is coming in at $850,000. And then we are investing in security and infrastructure for the utility, including dedicated SCADA fiber lines and networks for the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, and city operations. And our IT manager has applied for a grant of about $200,000, which will be a citywide IT security audit.
So, for Ms. Lawrence, when we see SCADA fiber line, SCADA, I won't go into too much detail, but we can remotely access or operate our pump stations and also manage or watch what's going on in our water and wastewater plants. SCADA is basically technology. I would like to say for security reasons, won't go into too much detail, but it allows us to manage those systems remotely and to monitor how the plants are operating. So,
What is the $220,000 master plan, if you could just elaborate on that a bit?
so I'll turn that to Adam Stewart, I think.
So great. So that is actually an update to our existing sanitary sewer collection system master plan that was completed, I think, in 2019. So it basically just updates future demands, projections, where we're going to see growth in our system, where do we need to increase line sizes, pump stations, where do we need capacity. So just updating projections in the plan and following our aggressive and very important master planning efforts across our systems.
And how often do you?
Best practice about every 5 years for these plans. We just completed our water distribution master plan update this past year. I think it was completed in 2017 or 2018.
So you did it in 2019, and we're 5 years out. That's your normal pattern.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And you've got you have 4 of these plans. So you got one for the water treatment plant, one for the wastewater plant, one for the collection system, one for the distribution system. So just about every year, Adam and his consultant teams will be in here updating you on those master plans. And that is the key, right, to our rate recommendations, our CIP, running a great utility for the customers. So we're not having situations like you've seen in Flint, Michigan, and other areas around the country.
And it allows us, as development occurs, to plan for that. As a developer comes in and says, oh, I want to put this development out here, then we have a plan that says, okay, well, if you're going to do this, we know the size lines you need to put in and how it's going to impact the system. And also, ultimately helps us project capacity in the plants. So, because, to make major expansions, it's, it's a 10, 15-year process. So it allows us to stay on top of that.
And how do you draw the information on your projections of growth? Because we know right now, it's kind of hard to know where we're going to have growth as far as the city is concerned. We kind of, I guess, understand where growth is going to be, that's going to be drawn on sewer, even in some areas of the county. But how do you go on that? Obviously, you can't use what you did in 2019.
So the data, it's the same set of data. You generally it's the TAS data, so it's the traffic and it's the same data that NCDOT uses to widen roads and improve road infrastructure. That data changes periodically, so we'll just be using the most updated TAS data. But we also will bring in development that we know that it may be coming in the future that we did not know about maybe 5 years ago. We work with the Partnership for Economic Development and gain any industrial insights from them. But it's really an update to our existing master plan. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to capital. So the FY25, oh, you good, Jen? Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're all right. The FY25 recommended budget for capital is about 63% higher than the FY24 revised amount. Again, we're seeing investments in operational equipment, water sewer line improvement, pump station improvement, and treatment plant improvements. The pump station improvements and treatment plant improvements, again, include SCADA upgrades. We're really focusing on that security aspect of the utility moving into FY25.
I will add that at the water and sewer meeting, from like industry, that's one of their biggest concern is security and that type of infrastructure. And so that's like one of the biggest things that we hear from them. And so I'm just happy that we invest this money in it because it gives our industrial partners just confidence that we're running a good, safe utility that's dependable and reliable.
And in addition to the SCADA improvements, we are investing in water tank security improvements as well. So it's across the board. Oh, no. Moving into debt service, my box got thrown off. The FY25, it's okay, Adam. The FY25 recommended budget is $1.5 million higher than the FY24 revised amount. And this is due to the French Broad River intake project coming online. And that, if I'm not mistaken, is almost done. This was provided in your memo, but we did want to provide one more kind of snapshot of the debt service. These are all the projects that the utility is currently paying debt service on. And we see some of these, like the Brightwater area, water distribution. We're starting to see some of these projects kind of roll off in debt service. So we're really focusing on paying that down.
Can we, just for Melinda, so that she understands like the impact of the French Broad River intake, like and that project and how it increases our capacity? And I know that's something that we hear a lot is, development is making our water shortage happen. And so just like, which is not the case, but maybe just explaining that project.
So yeah, that's the French Broad River intake. So it's a new water intake and pumping station on the French Broad River. It'll be our fourth water source. We have two existing sources in the Pisgah National Forest and an additional third source on the main stem of the Mills River. When we're in drought situations, we're very limited on what we can draw from those existing sources. So this French Broad River, the French Broad is a much larger river. So it basically will provide the utility really good drought resiliency as well as redundant water sources. It also will have a capacity of 15 million gallons per day. which we need to expand our treatment facility to that 15 million gallons per day, which should be completed within the next year and a half. So it's a good resiliency, and it also provides future capacity moving forward for new demand.
And I think I heard even at like peak usage, we were still operating at like 60% capacity at max, right? Was that where we were?
Yeah, so our peak day is usually about 9.5 million gallons per day. Our treatment facility is rated for 12 million gallons per day. The average daily demand is between 7.5 and 8 million gallons per day, but we really have to plan for that hottest day in summer when everyone's using all the water in their yards and washing cars. So.
Thank you.
And it will be completed, and we expect to do a tour with the Water Sewer Advisory Council, I think maybe in July or October, and probably would welcome the council to come out too in the fall sometime to see it. So,
Like a damn tour.
yes.
Any other notes on debt service? Good. Moving into other financing sources, the FY25 recommended budget is $22,000 over the FY24 revised level. This is due to a couple of reasons. We saw some one-time, I've lost it. Sorry. We saw some one-time sales and transfers in FY24. We had a sale of capital assets for $62,000 and then a transfer in for the water distribution master plan of $94,000. In FY25, we're planning a transfer out of $705,000. This includes a transfer to Fund 459 of $100,000, the vehicle and equipment purchases, which are totaling $530,000 this year, and then we do have a generator, an ATS project for $75,000.
Melinda, for your information, Fund 459 is our capital reserve fund for water and sewer.
And ATS is automatic transfer switch, so if the power goes off, generators automatically cut on and keep pressure in the system, keep the system moving forward, so pump stations.
And for Melinda's sake, Fund 459, I didn't know what that was either. So,
For Jeff's sake.
All right. Moving on. We are anticipating. The fund balance appropriation for the recommended budget sits at $226,000 higher than the FY24 revised level. Again, this is based on that 11 and 12% rate increase. The FY24 end of year, FY25 beginning of year fund balance sat at just under 9.4 million. Moving on into the estimated, assuming a 97.4 expenditure and 102.5 revenue collection, we are looking to put 504,000 back into fund balance with an end of year fund balance totaling just under 9.9 million. Moving on to parking.
You can just keep it in advance. It's just one slide.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
I won't talk ad nauseum about parking today. In reality, the big takeaway here for this fund is the end of year estimate is we probably will need about $70,000 from the general fund to maintain the sustainability of the increases in the expenditures for that fund. We only have 1 year worth of parking revenue during a arguably down year from an economic perspective and a tourism perspective. So I do believe if things start to brighten up from an economic perspective, those revenues will catch up with the expenditures. In the meantime, the parking fund does owe the general fund still about $400 and something thousand, and the general fund is just going to continue to kind of carry the difference until that fund can reach a sustainable level. But we have no recommended changes for parking. We just want to let that keep cooking and get to a sustainable level in the future.
Do you want the clicker, Adam?
No, just, it's only 3 slides. Stormwater Fund, Fund 67, in the FY25 budget for your consideration, there's a $1 per month increase per ERU. So for all residential properties, that means instead of a $6 fee, a $7 fee. And due to that rate increase, the revenues in FY25 are $220,000 higher than the FY24 revised budget. On the expenditure side of the house, reflected in the personnel budget are the factors that we've already discussed, the cost of living adjustment, medical insurance changes, so on and so forth. Looking at the operating and capital, most of that change is explained by a shift from placing contracted items, contracted stormwater infrastructure work in the capital outlay category in the operating. So you'll notice a $156,000 increase in the operating expenditures in FY25 and a $291,000 decrease in capital. That's not reflective of us not putting stormwater infrastructure in the ground. That's just purely accounting, recording, making sure we have budget to pay our contractors to do stormwater related work. Finally, there's a decrease in the debt service attributable to paying off the debt service on one of our prior debt funded vehicles for the stormwater fund. An important note in the FY25 budget, because we've mentioned that the stormwater fund has been covered by the general fund, there is a budgeted $106,000 transfer out to the general fund to reimburse it for that coverage. And that may not be needed to that full extent, depending on how FY24 actuals result, and we'll know that during the audit process. So next slide, if you will, Jenny. Pointing towards the further future for the stormwater fund, we're building towards a true utility structure and aiming at issuing an FY27 revenue bond for stormwater. So we created this rate model in FY23 to stay on top of the revenues we need to build up a fund balance, keep up with expenditures, and eventually issue that $7 million bond for stormwater master plan projects that Mike Huffman has identified. So that's attributed to that all leads into the $1 per month rate increase, which was presented to Business Advisory Committee last year and also the City Council. So we're pushing forward with that same recommendation. And this is all important because similar to the Water Sewer Fund, if we do a revenue bond for stormwater, we will have a general trust indenture. There will be a bond covenant that we have to keep pace with, and that requires us to maintain a certain level of fund balance. So just getting more into the detail, this is the primary driver of that entire structure, the rate increases. It's the $7 million revenue bond. So the debt service on that project every year based on our just baseline assumptions, 20-year borrowing at a 4.5% interest rate, level debt service, we would be paying just shy of $540,000 a year in debt service for all those stormwater projects.
And this is really falls in line with the natural progression of building up a true utility, much like the water and sewer system that's much more mature from a fund perspective, has the master plans in place, has the regular revenue bond cycles. This would be pushing our stormwater system into that. Mike is, I think, finishing up the master plan now. I think Brendan is that, if that's correct. Yeah, getting a nod there for the full system. And we'll start regularly updating the system and maintaining it to a very high level from a stormwater infrastructure perspective.
Are there any questions on stormwater before we transition to ESF? Is everybody good there?
Moving on to environmental services, again, just kind of a quick snapshot for everybody. On the revenue side of things, we are budgeting pretty conservatively, keeping it in line with the FY24 revised budget. We do have a lot of development happening, and those will come online, and we'll adjust the budget when the time is right for that. For expenditures, personnel and benefits, again, the fund is seeing a bit of that new split to more equitably show the workload associated with it. Again, the COLA, there are no recommended FTE additions this year. For operating, slight change of about 3.5% less than the FY24 revised level budget. We are not including any new capital in FY25. However, the fund did purchase a small refuse truck, so we do see a slight increase in debt service. We did want to note that the general fund is having to help the ESF balance the budget in the beginning of the year, so we're transferring in just about $82,000. However, we are estimating that by the end of the year, the fund will be able to pay back the general fund about $37,000.
Has that rate study been done yet?
It is we are in the process. We're right in the middle of it, I think. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
the consultant was out following our trucks around a few weeks back.
Yeah.
So we're in the process of finishing that study. And we kind of wanted to keep sanitation flat this year, nothing new until we heard kind of what the next steps are and come back with next budget year talking about the recommendations from that study.
Okay.
And for fund balance, there are no real changes.
Currently, the sanitation fund owes the general fund about $150,000. So until it pays that back, it's going to maintain a fund balance of zero.
Any other questions on ESF? We did want to, are we breaking? What time are we? No, good.
I think we can cover the fee schedule changes and then we'll break for lunch, Jenny.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So we did want to highlight some of the recommended fee schedule changes. First, in community development, if I'm not mistaken, this is for historic preservation lieu. Certificate of appropriateness for major and minor work, with the major coming in at $75 and then the minor coming in at $50. For public works, we are recommending a few changes for Oakdale Cemetery, the biggest of which is the removal of the infant lot charges, and we are looking to add a museum space charge. And they're also looking to get rid of the AM large assembly room rental. And then the Patton Park field usage is going from $10 to $30, and that's per player per season. That season kind of got cut off there. Environmental services, they are seeing increased burden for switching out carts. Somebody will ask for a small cart and then need a new one. And so they have asked that we add in a cart switch out fee, which is $30 regardless of what size they're switching out.
So the field usage is $30 per person per season?
Season.
So if a team, it'd be like $300 for a team of, for the whole season? I don't, is there a frequency of usages that they're allowed to have for that, or is that?
Did we lose Tom?
That way we can get you that information from Tom.
And then what is is this the large assembly room here?
It is.
And so it was available from 8 to 5 and now it's no longer available? Or are we just not charging from the 8 to 5 time?
I think we're taking it off availability just because it's being used constantly by internal folks.
Okay.
I mean, we use it on a regular basis daily.
Was there a fee already for people using this room?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the $100 for the AM.
It's just being used so much, it's just not available.
And we've collected on every event that's been here?
That we'd have to go back and check, but I'm assuming so that they're charged.
Okay.
Jenny, on this temporary grave marker not installed, there's a fine of $100. So if the funeral home does not have a temporary marker there, they will be fined $100. Does the marker has to be of any type, specific material? Because I know some of them may just put the information on index card and put it within the holder. Before, there were temporary markers that were maybe metal or brick, so just for clarification there for my benefit.
So, and again, it's a question for Tom. We've got, and Tom stepped out. He's heading to our graduation, but we do have, they specified the type marker they had to use so that they can identify who's buried at that location, because we've run into some situations where folks have not done that and it's caused some issues. So we do require, but they are temporary. We always encourage to proceed with some type of headstone or monument.
And what is the time span from when the deceased is in tomb? You give them a time limit, like 5, 10 days, because some people may, may.
I'll find out an answer. I don't know if, we'll find out.
Moving on to the water sewer side of the recommended changes, it is, we're looking to reinstate the incentive program, the incentive rebate program for high efficiency toilets, dishwashers, and washing machines. This will be first administered by some folks in our water sewer department, which will then let finance know what bills need to have rebates placed on them. For miscellaneous fees, the sewer line inspection fee was increased to $6 per linear square foot. They did recommend adding a reinspection fee of $3 per linear foot, again, because they're having to go back out over and over. So it's just to try to cut down on that. The equipment usage rates have been updated per FEMA or to reflect FEMA. And then as we discussed before for stormwater, we're recommending increasing it to 7 a month with a cap of $350.
And FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They publish rates that are used for federal reimbursement. So that's typically what most cities use if we do kind of a rental situation or usage. So it's a standardized rate put out by the federal government.
And those are broken out by line item in the schedule.
Water system shutdown, 600, what is that exactly? I mean, I know it's water system shutdown, but how does it?
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Yeah, so there's two fees there. There's the drill for water main tap. So that was previously, it was $150 per inch. Our costs are pretty much the same regardless of how big that tap is. Our crews drill that. So whether it's a 2-inch or a 6-inch, it's the same amount of cost. And that our cost on that is about $650 for crew time and equipment. The water system shutdown is where a contractor has to actually cut into a water main and turn the water off. So we have personnel that are on site to turn the valves. We also have personnel costs for getting the message out to our customers that will be temporarily out of service when that work happens. Part of that too is when the water is turned off, we have to collect a water sample and run a bacteriological test for that. And we do that at our water treatment facility. So we do have costs to perform that as well. So that is reflective in that $600.
Thank you.
Do we charge fees when our lines are cut accidentally?
If the contractor that cuts them is at fault, yes.
Okay.
If we're at fault, like if we did not mark the line properly, then no, we do not.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Just like we're charged if we hit someone else's line.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And John, I've got an answer on the markers for Melinda. So after 24 hours of internment, they have to place the temporary marker. And then within 6 months of the burial, they have to place the permanent marker.
Thanks, Brian.
And I think we're going to break here for.
Hold on, I want to close out one item that was asked about early on. So Dr. Hensley asked about assessed values within the county. So we've done some research. The city and the county as a whole is 8%. The city is 18%. And the county alone is 2% tax exempt. So a very large difference in the number of tax exempt properties within the county versus within the city. So I just want to close that loop. Very good.